And welcome. Great to see pretty good turnout in person from councillors and staff, and welcome Martin online. I was wondering, Laura, fantastic. I think this is your first meeting for Corporate and Strategic.
Aye.
So can I impose on you to welcome to give us an opening karakia?
So I'm Mormon. E tō mātou mato I te rangi kia tapitoina, kia tā mai tō rangatiratanga, kia mea te tai e pai e ki runga te whenua. Haro ki te whenua, e te anō. O te ingoa tapu āmini.
Kia ora.
But you're going to let me give a mihi
the
then
floor's
which would
yours.
be more appropriate.
The floor is yours, Laura.
Well, kia ora koutou katoa, ko Laura Kāmau toko ingoa no Kurungata au I te pito o Heratanga, Bridgepark. I'm here representing the tangata whenua members of the RPC, and thank you for the appointment and accepting my appointment. I'm excited to be on this committee as I stretch my wings as the eagle that soars over in order to affect change within our corporate and strategic direction to include our voices. And I've got such a lot of things to say about the recovery and and the recommendations that were made in there, especially round 2. That hadn't been developed in the recommendations. So I think that's my agenda today, and looking forward to seeing how Hawke's Bay Regional Council does their strategic view and how I can report back to our people. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Right, so just moving through housekeeping, we are being live streamed today on the Council Facebook, recorded for viewing at a later date on YouTube. In the event of an earthquake, drop, cover and hold. If the shaking is long and strong, get gone. And we hope it's not one of those 9.1s that they're studying down in Wellington at the moment. When shaking subsides, leave the building through the nearest exit, proceed immediately towards Napier Hill, along Dalton Street to Tiffin Park, up steps to Cameron Road. If an emergency alarm sounds, immediately evacuate the building through the nearest exit and proceed to the assembly area. On the grass, just out the front here, corner of Dalton and Vautier, emergency exits are clearly signposted. Toilets down the hall at the back. So apologies. I have apologies from Councillors Sears and Roadley. Are there any others?
I think Hokianga for lateness.
For lateness, thank you. Someone to move. Thank you, Hinawai. Second that. Thank you, Jock. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. So do we have any conflicts of interest to declare? There are none. Thank you. So moving on to the minutes from the last meeting, 21st of February. Do we have any amendments to those minutes? Not, can I have a mover, please? I won't look at you, Laura, because you weren't here. Thank
I've
you.
read them, so therefore I can.
Councillor Van Beek, and a seconder.
It's the end of the meeting. Oh, let's pick up.
You can have another go. You can't move and second. I do need a second. Thank you. Thank Councillor McIntosh. All those in favour?
All right.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Right. So we would be moving on to public forum at this point, and I welcome the opportunity to do that. However, we have no one who wants to speak today, so we're going to move on through quite quickly. I am conscious that we're in the middle of a consultation around the long-term plan, and people are having plenty to say about that, and we welcome all that. And we expect in a couple of weeks' time to hear many submissions and have read them beforehand. Right, so moving along to item 5, future of severely affected land, fossil delivery.
I can introduce this paper if you'd like.
Yeah. I'd just like to make a couple of opening comments if I can before you do that. So, without wishing to direct my colleagues in any particular direction, I think one of the key points that we need to consider here is our understanding of our overall understanding of the project management office, which this paper goes some way towards. We have had one previous paper on the PMO, and that was in March, EICC in March. To my mind, there were two key messages in that in relation to the PMO structure. One was that a governance framework was being developed, and the second one, at a program governance board, terms of reference were being developed. So prior to that paper, that is really the extent of our knowledge, so quite tentative. So we would be, they have had some discussions about getting more clarity given the scale of this and that it's essentially a new business unit for council. So there's a lot to understand and unpick. And so a challenge today is to work out how much clarity we get from the paper that's been presented and what, if any, further questions we need to ask. With that, staff, please lead us through.
If I can just introduce the purpose of the paper, and thank you, Zen, for your comments. I guess this is a primary role of the Corporate and Strategic Committee, as you can see, as part of the terms of reference, is the consideration of resourcing implications and initiatives in significant financial matters. So the purpose of this paper is to bring to you, after being at the EICC, an outline of how the intention of this program is going to work, and what currently the considerations are that have been taken to how it's governed and how it's managed and how we are going to progress those projects through that $250 million spend. Today, we would like to raise for approval, given the extent of this program and the amount of money that we are going to spend, we are proposing an increase of delegations to our CE. That is to allow the signing off of contracts and processing of payments as we look to progress through. You will note in the paper that at the moment we actually haven't spent a lot in terms of financial implications to date. That is primarily because we are rapidly spinning our wheels to engage with the communities and do the upfront planning of all those works. Anyway, I will hand over now to the team to take us through some of the key points in the paper.
Yep, so really just hand over to Jess to take through some key points, and then I think we just spend most of our time in a discussion so we can provide the answers you'd like to see. Probably just as part of my introduction, the IPMO, I probably wouldn't call it a new business unit. It is a transition of a previously existing capital project delivery team, acknowledging that the size and scale of the capital delivery had been altered. And so we took professional advice into different mechanisms of delivery, and we've substantially grown that team. But they're still part of the organisation. They're not run as an independent business unit or anything like that. They're fully integrated into the organisation, and all of the supporting functions, although we have some dedicated resources, are highly reliant on the core functions within the organisation. So those linkages into the organisation are really important. And what we've been trying to do with this paper is foreshadow potential risks and put interventions in prior to them occurring. And we all know that the timeliness is really important, and that any delays in the execution of the program have real escalation costs. And so the current escalation, is $2 million a month, and no escalation is allowed for within our Crown contract. So we have some tension around that. And the other thing, just to point out, that we clarified at the EICC, is we had inadvertently used the word governance, and we clarified in the EICC that it was all about assurance. And so we worked through that issue on the day with that particular paper, because within industry, governance is commonly used about how you provide assurance to large contracts or large alliances, because many of those structures don't involve a council with governors. So for us, it's a little bit confusing, and we've had to translate industry language into council language, and we did clarify at the last EICC, it's all about the program assurance rather than governance, just to clarify the separation of the councillors to the staff within the organisation. So with that, Jess, I'll pass it to you for a bit more finer detail, and then I think we'll just have a Q&A or discussion session.
Yeah, I just want to add the intention here is to try and still work within our existing policies and frameworks as much as possible, but there's some that don't allow for us to do certain things to deliver the program. So this paper is purely about foreseeing that being a problem down the line to timing and working within our LTP budgets as they come forward. Yeah, so I don't think I've got anything more to add than what's in the paper at this point, so I'm happy to take questions.
Right, questions on the paper?
Yeah, I've got one question. And I'll give a bit of an example beforehand. I've been involved with two large projects since 2020, a $2.3 million build and a $5.8 million build. Once we got the budget down, we kept to that price and actually had a reduction. So personally, I can't believe that we're accepting a $2 million increase per month over the build cost. So I think you need to have, and there's another question in there as well, you need to have possibly a tighter control of what we do and how we do it.
So just to clarify, we're not accepting $2 million per month escalation. We're using that catchphrase, if you like, as an opportunity to highlight that certainly the last few years construction escalation indexes were running over 10%, and we meet with industry all the time. John and I were up with Auckland talking to contractors. Recently it's probably just popped below 10%, but it's still quite high. So we're certainly not accepting those costs. What we're saying is they are a major risk to the program, and we have to manage around that. So part of that is managing costs, managing scope. There's lots of different ways to do it, but I just wanted to point out we're certainly not accepting $2 million a month on 250. We're just highlighting that that's where the market is, and so it's important that we acknowledge that because every project that's delayed in construction due to slow decision making or re-engineering things has the potential to cause those costs.
I'll have a comment on that later.
Yeah.
Councillor Curtin.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to, I'm just a little bit lacking in appreciating where you're telling us that this fits into essentially our current operating model. Financially, though, I'm looking at the level of service funding impact statement and looking for it in there. Where would I find it? Is it part of what we've foreshadowed in our documents, or is it a separate set of accounting for it?
So it's all coming through the standard financial reporting that council already.
I appreciate the reporting, but I'm looking for it in the, for example, the funding impact statement. There I'm seeing numbers that look just like business as usual.
What page are you looking at?
Page 13 of group of activities, level of service. It's not in this set, it's obviously part of our LTP set.
So you're referring to a different document that's not part of this item?
The link to this item
Yeah.
is that where do I find that financial accounting within our document set? Is it incorporated into this, for example? So am I seeing the numbers that you are proposing in the plan in this document set?
So yes, you've got within the asset management group of activities is where this set of NIWI resilience work sits of the IPMO.
Sure.
It's phased out over 3 years of the LTP, and I think some of it is also left for a year 4. So it won't add to the exact amount of the Crown contract, but that's where it sits within the LTP.
So where I see in the coming year 26.6 mil, the out year 27.7, 27.9, those three numbers combined is less than 100 million. So where?
So that is our amount. That's our Hawke's Bay Regional Council
I'm with you now.
amount
So
to
the
contribute.
Crown's contribution sets it aside. We're not introducing the Crown contribution into our accounts per se. They're accounted for separately.
I don't believe it's in our funding impact statement, but I'd have to refer to the CFO to confirm that. But the Crown income or contribution will be running through our accounts.
Is running through
It should be, yeah, it will be.
but I'm just not seeing it in, well, I guess it subsidies, grants and operating purposes. It's not sitting there, so I just wondered where it was sitting.
I think you only see the leftover, or the Hawke's Bay Regional Council contribution
Yeah,
amount at the bottom.
That's correct, yeah. So what will be happening is HBRC will be incurring the costs, and as part of this paper, we've said we're anticipating doing monthly reimbursements to the Crown Infrastructure Partners. And so what you'll see in our accounts is the net amount, which should equal, after 4 years, 44 million, which is our contribution towards the $250 million cost.
So sorry to labour this. So sitting aside from our set of accounts is another accounting framework. No?
It sits within the same.
Well,
framework.
how do you account for the Crown's? How do you?
It comes
where
through
does the money
as
come in and go out?
revenue, and
Yes.
the full 250 million will be expensed through our accounts.
It's a reimbursement.
Capitalised.
So just maybe to clarify, rather than receiving a lump sum of the Crown's contribution, we are receiving it drip feed and basically we hope they pay it 30 days or something like that is what's going on.
We're anticipating having monthly reimbursements, whether it's a reimbursement or it's a cost, a forward plan, we're yet to confirm with them. But that's how it's going to work. It'll be a reimbursement, not a receipt of 200 million lump sum, and we manage cash.
And that's somewhat an understandable, and this is a question, one of the questions that I had at the point of the paper that talks about this, because our experience for some funding has been we've received lump sums and then we've had the benefit of that from an interest point of view.
So it's similar to the Kānawa funding, which is on a quarterly basis, but they pay in advance, like quarterly in advance. So through our discussions with Crown, that's what we asked for, but what they came back with was in arrears. And we're still working through the detail because at the end of the day, we're trying to minimise our costs of providing that cash flow, and that's an angle that we're continuing to work with Crown.
So I'm happy with my understanding of that, but Councillor Curtin?
Well, I'm seeing a lot of money coming in and a lot of money going out, but in our funding impact statement, we're only seeing our portion of it. So I'm interested to know, if I perhaps have a chat to you about how that's treated going forward. The other element to it, a similar line, is the insurance management plan and how that is looking to be reported back to, where's it likely to land in terms of back to council?
Did you mean assurance or insurance?
Well, the assurance management plan and your various health checks, technical assurance reviews, phase gate reviews, etc., where do they go?
Yeah, so if I can...
Do they arrive at the council table?
Yes, they do, yeah. So they still try and fit into our similar reporting lines that we've already got with asset management and the capital delivery program, which comes through the EICC. And given the magnitude of the volume of this work, it'll need to go through the risk and audit committee as well for certain metrics too. So I can refer you to paragraph 20 in the diagram. We've made a little tweak to this diagram in that we've brought the green box, which is essentially council, across the whole top of this. But essentially the assurance group that we've put in to provide monitoring insurance at a program level will still come through the Chief Executive and ELT and through our normal committees as we always have done.
So that assurance group will report to the risk and audit and to this committee?
So what the paper says is what we're proposing is that infrastructure delivery traditionally reports its project progress, etc., to the EICC, to the Environment and Integrated Catchment Committee. And so that's what's suggested in the paper, that we continue to report there. That matters of risk and assurance would go to the Risk and Assurance Committee, and that oversight on the financial would come through with the normal financials for the whole of the organisation to this particular committee. That's what we're testing, that we keep our traditional reporting lines, our business as usual reporting lines for this particular program. That's what this paper is suggesting.
Okay, I understand that. Do you want to make a comment on that, Councillor Curtin, or shall we move on to the next question?
No, I've got another question, but others.
My question's just based on how you allocated the 215 million. If it's project-based, have you identified the projects?
Absolutely. So that was done in August last year. That's locked in through a Crown contract.
Yeah.
So that they cannot be changed without negotiating with the Crown.
And was a business case set aside for each project and that amounted to those?
So it was done very rapidly in accordance with the Crown processes and negotiation, and all councils negotiated with the Crown in a very compressed time frame. So it's the one thing to reflect on. It's the best deal the region have ever got in terms of Crown funding of flood resilience infrastructure. The business cases are now being developed, and Crown through Crown Infrastructure Partners already have a number of those, and have provided some feedback around the optimal way to submit those. So that's being worked through now.
Just one more question. Resource management. Is there any projects that require resource management applications?
Absolutely. So we've been working through, again, a process around the order in council, because again, one of the biggest risks is delays. What the order in council, which I think is yet to be finalised, would do for us is give us a fixed time period to have those conversations. Obviously, all of the normal work needs to be done, and a lot of that work has already commenced. And so we do need to work through consents for most of these projects.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ormsby.
Kia ora, Chair. Thank you. My questions relate to 14.2 and 14.3. So in terms of the business cases that we submit to the Crown, could you just talk us through the 3 drafts at the moment, where they sit? What are the risks in terms of delay of those business cases coming back to us to start unlocking the next phase of the projects?
Maybe you can talk about what's in them, but at the moment, in terms of critical path, certainly the critical path is consultation with communities, and that level of agreement, I guess, or working through what the particular interventions are at a community level. That is our critical path at the moment. That could rapidly transfer into other areas, but they are very important that we work through them quickly. And I'll let Jess just go through sort of what they contain. and the feedback that we've received from Crown on that.
Yeah, so they contain details around our project scope or proposed scope of the solutions, the milestones and budgets, and the timing and scheduling. There's also some benefit cost analysis done within those. However, our feedback so today is that they've been very detailed of the ones that we have prepared, and they've asked us to just pull it back a little bit and get them all in at a slightly higher level. So we're sort of going back to resubmit those on that basis. All the work we've done to date in the detailed aspect is still beneficial and helps us continue on.
And is this our first round of business cases? So you could say ideally the following cases that go forward have a smoother process to go through. Yeah.
That's what
Okay.
we're proposing.
And just supplementary, please, Chair. In terms of 14.3, I'm concerned that we haven't landed who is going to pay for the Havelock North Dam solutions. So can someone give us an update on that?
Through you, Chair, the original funding agreement that this council signed with the Crown back last year, HBRC signed off all of the flood protection works. So our name is at the bottom of that agreement with the Crown. The discussion currently underway with Hastings District Council is subsequent to that. It was clear that the scheme is theirs and they own the scheme and they have taken responsibility for doing the works in Havelock North. Their current view of Hastings District Council is that because we signed the agreement with the Crown, we should rate for the local share essentially on their behalf and then pass the money over to them. That'll be the subject of a paper to come to council in the next month or so, because we need to make clear what council wishes to do in that regard. The funding agreement with the Crown, under the funding agreement with the Crown, we have to provide the local share of $2.5 million, I think it is. But we don't have to be the people who rate for it, if you like. So it would seem a more streamlined process that Hastings rates for it. We guarantee that the local share has been provided by them because they're managing the project. Their current view is we need to rate for it because we signed the contract with or the agreement with the Crown. I think that's all resolvable. The work is carrying on because we don't want the community to be held up while the two councils figure out kind of how to manage that.
Thank you.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah, morning Tato. Thank you, Chair. Couple of questions. Firstly, around the Program Assurance Board and the Program Board structure, just looking at paragraphs 21 to 23 relative to the table, the graph or diagram above it. I wasn't at the EICC in March, so apologies if I'm a bit behind the 8 ball here. Just a bit of interchangeable use of terms here. Chris, can you help me? 21, we've got reference to the Program Assurance Board within the acronym PAG. 22 refers to a Program Governance Board, and then 23 refers to Program Governance Board meetings. Should I be reading 22 and 23 as referring to the Program Assurance Board in each case, rather than something called the Program Governance Board?
That's correct. We did a word search and we missed a couple, so that's an error.
That's good. But can you just then, with that clarity in mind, just explain to me the difference between the NIWA Program Board and the NIWA Program Assurance Group in terms of their respective functions?
Yeah,
you go back to the diagram above there.
Touch on that, and I might refer also to David Nalder who's our independent advisor on risk and assurance. So the NIWA Program Board, the intentions are that they would do provide direction in the decision making required within the NIWA program framework. that will then be monitored and assured by the program assurance group. So really delineating those roles. David, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, thank you. Clear intention here has been to ensure that the roles and accountabilities of all those in the program are very clearly defined and delineated. The logic behind having a separation between a program assurance board and the NIWI program board is to ensure that those who are directly leading the delivery of the work, the program board, so these are the people who are making the key decisions around program delivery, that above them there is a monitoring and oversight function that creates a healthy tension to ensure that, for instance, appropriate ways of working are embedded within the program. There's a good understanding of risk and approach to manage risk. There's appropriate sources of assurance that are coming through, and that the program reporting that gives a view around current status and activities and actions is rigorous. So the distinction between the Program Assurance Board is it provides the monitoring and oversight over the direction and decision making of the Program Board that's leading the project, the program itself.
Thanks, that's very helpful. So one sets the program, one provides the assurance and oversight at each stage. Now, the next question I've got is around the delegation issue. And I was wondering why we had sort of two separate recommendations, that there is a delegation to the Chief Executive increased to 15, and then a specific approval by exception beyond that. That's paragraphs 2 and 3. To give a bit more context to my question, which Nick might be able to help with, and then the paper drills down to issues of sub-delegation and discussing this at around 39. And I'm wondering if sub-delegation is somehow tangled up in all of this. In other words, what we're signing off here is not only delegation to 15 by exception beyond 15, but also some element of sub-delegation. Can you just unpack that a little bit more, please, Nick, or someone? And then I've got a follow-up question, please, Chair.
Councillor Williams, Susie here. I can help answer this. So the primary purpose of what we're asking today is to seek approval for the CEO delegation. That is your role to approve the delegation starting with the CE. What we're not asking for approval of, but what we're telling you is going to happen, is that it is likely that Nick will then increase the delegations or sub-delegations under that. I don't need your approval for that, but I'm telling you that is what's going to likely happen. What I do need your approval for is to increase Nick's delegation to the 15 million. Nick, would you like to add to that?
Just the only context I would put in there is that this is only within the boundaries of what council has already agreed, and if any of the business cases for this don't add up, i.e. they go over the amounts that council has already agreed, then that would need to come back to council, because there's a financial implication beyond what you've already put in your LTP and beyond what you have already put in the agreement with the Crown. So the purpose, as I understand it, is speeding up the internal process within our current arrangement. It can't sit outside our current arrangement.
That's right.
I understand that. That's helpful to a degree. So is it, are you pointing out, Susie, that it would be inherent to increasing the Chief Executive's delegation to 15, that the sub-delegation could be to the same sum? Or does the group manager delegation, for example, remain at 5? I'm just wanting to understand what we're being asked here.
1 to 5.
Yeah, it changes from 1 to 5 underneath those sub-delegations, if that was your question.
Right.
What's your question?
The red is the new.
The red is the new proposed, that's correct.
And so you're not asking us to make the red in that table, you're just saying that's what would happen if we approve the recommendations in the paper.
That is correct. I'm only seeking your approval today to increase the CEO delegation to 15 million.
Now, one last question. Just a scenario paint this for me. I mean, there's no agenda behind my questions. I'm literally wanting to understand, what some pretty big procurement contract decisions here. the timing, what is the urgency here? Is this a situation where you need to sign contracts once you've finished business cases and you've got funding from the Crown approved within matters of days, that there's simply no ability to refer it to the next council meeting or corporate and strategic committee meeting throughout the sequence, or there is some concern around that? Can you just give me a sort of scenario as to why this would need, why this is so important?
So I'd say, look, no contracts are going to be signed tomorrow, but we are looking to launch into construction in the next construction season, which is notionally October. And so we would want contracts signed prior to then. And so we're just highlighting this is why we would like to work through this particular issue in advance of these decisions needing to be made. The other principle is typically everything in the LTP that the chief executive what's the word? Able to execute. And that's normally not a problem in a normal LTP year. But this LTP year, we know we're likely to have commitments beyond the existing delegations. So that's really the high-level principle behind this. Everything is in the LTP is agreed to be delivered. We're not trying to deliver anything outside of what's already been agreed. If anything changes, it comes back to council. But to execute the agreed LTP, we're saying that the financial delegations provide some risk to the program because there's an uncertainty of how they would be managed. So
yeah, thank you, Chris. You've partly answered my question, but not entirely. So I'm not talking about the period between now and October. I was more thinking of a scenario once we're in the thick of it. Are you envisaging a scenario where you might need to be executing contracts within a matter of days at that point, and it's simply not possible to refer back to a council meeting for an approval? I just really wanted to understand that.
Yeah, so Martin, if I could answer that. So our procurement plans and process that we've mapped out, there are some pretty tight timeframes to turn around some of these contracts. So we're trying to do as much as we can in parallel at the start to front end this, but I do think we will hit some time pressures that will not allow us to come back to council to get those approved within the timely fashion.
Or at least you're trying to provide for that contingency. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I'll just pose a follow-up question. Trying to understand in terms of the delegations, the difference between the standard and the by exception. What does by exception mean, and how would that operate, please?
So the first one, in terms of increasing the delegation for the CE, if we were to ask for that to be over and above the 15 million, it would apply to the whole of council operations, in the way our financial system can be set up to have those controls in place. So the reason for the second request to by exception is that we are asking within the NIWI program only that Nick still has council delegation to enact any contracts over and above 15 million, as long as it's within our LTP already planned budgets, because there will be some contracts that could get close to 40 million. But we would be expecting we would have a little bit more time on those to be able to come back to council, but we are just asking, given that he can already execute what's in the LTP, those financial delegations, we don't want to increase to risk other parts of the business, so to speak.
So does the by exception mean if there's a degree of urgency for those really large ones above 15 million where there's not an opportunity to bring back to a council meeting? Okay, understood, thank you.
Just to comment on that.
Councillor,
No, you go first. I already asked the question.
Ollie.
Thanks, Chair. Just wanted to question around the reporting going forward. Like I've had a little bit of concern around the visibility looking back and in paragraph 14, so is Wellington. And I note that you're going to update them on a weekly basis, so we're going to get the financials quarterly at this committee, project quarterly, or is it 6 weekly at EICC, but those weekly updates with Crown, is that a Zoom meeting? Was that a printed report to them?
Just an online meeting, a more operational meeting of how the program's going.
Okay. I guess, as Chris said, like, it's testing it going forward, but just we'll be very interested in the reporting going forward, because when we are in the thick of it, obviously things are going to be happening quickly. Those affected communities are going to be probably on our case quite a bit, you know, just wanting to be updated themselves. And so it'd be good to have some sort of way of accessing the information, exactly where we're at, what's happening, better than we have looking back.
So there's, I think, a couple of things there in terms of the communities and their being informed. We've got a dedicated comms and engagement team within the IPMO, and part of their role is to keep communities informed with the non-financial details, so to speak. So they know what's happening, they know when trucks are going to turn up, they know when the job's going to be complete, etc. So I think we're really beefing up that area, and we do acknowledge that as we built the IPMO, there were gaps in our communication, and one of those gaps was through to Crown, and we're plugging that, which is part of the reason we now have a weekly meeting, and that's also about developing the relationship with Crown Infrastructure Partners. So we're talking frequently, and there's no surprises.
Part of that weekly meeting with Crown is they've reviewed our program and made some suggestions on how we can further fast track what we're doing. Prior to that meeting, I would say that we were operating very quickly and moving with haste. But following that, we have implemented a number of other initiatives to pull the program even further forward. That does put pressure on the team, and it does come with some risk. So that weekly meeting is about reviewing those actions and tracking those to see how we're going in that regard. A lot of that relates to engagement with the contracting market, relates to procurement and our strategy around procurement, and also reporting in terms of our program assurance framework. We can't report on financials weekly. We simply don't receive our invoices from our suppliers on that basis, but monthly we will be tracking cost, schedule and risk on a monthly basis to the program board. And then for the NIWI stuff, NIWI part of our program, we'll be reporting that up to the PAG. So we will be running a full suite of program management controls over all this, including tracking financials very closely. Part of that will be measuring what our cost to date is versus our effort to date, to ensure that those are commensurate with each other. We'd hate to see that cost to date exceeded our effort to date in terms of percentage complete. There's early indications that we need to be tightening up on our controls. So we do have a number of measures in place to manage finances.
Thank you.
Councillor Curtin.
So first a comment and a question. I appreciate the questioning of Councillor Williams, because the paper actually hasn't really got much meat around and information why you actually want to up to 50 million. So my question is, you're talking about speed, and the government wants to even go quicker. What is the reason for speed? Just want to find, what is the real reason that we need to go? Is this for protection of community, or is it about cost blowout?
Both. It would be both. The Crown is certainly very cognizant of the fact that we have communities still at risk where there is no flood mitigation scheme in place. That is what our NIWI program work is about addressing. But they're also very financially aware of the escalation costs at the 8 to 12% a year, or it might be around 6 to 10 at our current point in time. So the earlier that we can bring work to contract and lock in contract rates, then we minimise that risk exposure to cost escalation. In terms of the report, we do talk about our schedules and how we have pulled contingency and risk out of those schedules, so as to show probably the most optimistic timeframes to deliver in. There will be change process around that, where we will need to report change on our schedules but they are in their vernacular around going faster, just motivating us to try and manage that risk as much as we can. So it is very much about risk to community and financial risk. So there's no more money. Okay.
In our language, in my own native language, we've got a saying that haste and speed are seldom beneficial, and I know that myself because the amount of time that I've actually got a cup at A&E with my name on it, you know, because I do things too fast. But anyway, so the Program Assurance Board, are they purely looking at that the processes are followed proper, or is there more assurance as in whether money is well spent? So haste and speed, are we going through a tendering process, or are we actually saying, well, that crowd over there is a good contractor, we actually let him do that particular job and we make sure they do it right? What's the process? Is the Program Assurance Board, are they actually looking over whether money is well spent, or whether just the processes are followed proper?
Through you, Chair, before I, just to answer the councillor's question, just before I hand to John and Chris, perhaps just give councillors a view of why I have required the team to put a board in place. So for me as the Chief Executive, I look at the size and scale of this project or program. It carries for this council both reputational risk and financial risk. It carries risk in terms of what we are trying to deliver on behalf of those communities and our relationship with the Crown. And I want to be assured that I have a mechanism in place that gives me assurance that the right process is being followed by the project team, that they are doing the right work around procurement, community engagement, etc., and managing all of that. And I want an assurance that's not purely my employment relationship directly with my group manager, but I want some extra eyes across that. So I've looked to insert both extra ELT members, so Susie's role, because she comes back to ultimately risk and assurance management in her role, and look to have pulled in both the Crown, because they are partners in this process, and a couple of people who are independent of my staff. So if this was a $10 million project, I'd just be doing it in my normal relationship with Chris. Because it's a $250 million project and carries all of that risk, I am insistent that I need that level of assurance in order to report to you, and without it, I would feel uncomfortable. So that's the kind of broad context for having that in place, and I'll maybe ask team to answer the detail.
Yeah, so look, I think John could probably go through the contracting strategy, but effectively insurance is ensuring that our risks are being well managed, and because one of our biggest risks is the financials, we need to tension up the pricing, and to the point that John and I spent a day in Auckland last week actually talking to contractors, the national contractors based in Auckland, advertising the fact that we had this work. So we're actually inviting as many people who want to be involved in the process as we can, and I'll let John go through the detail a bit of a high level on the procurement strategy.
Thanks, Chris, and through you, Mr. Chair, I'll try and cover all those questions, but you might have to remind me if I miss. So the Program Assurance Group there is there to ensure that, firstly, our processes and our management plans that we develop to deliver this program are appropriate in terms of their scale and breadth, and are going to be managing all the aspects of our program appropriately. And then they'll be checking to make sure that we're following those management plans and those processes. So part of those suite of documents will be a procurement strategy that identifies how we intend to engage with the market, to engage the service providers that we require to deliver the work. They will sign off on that, and then we will implement that strategy. And as we move through that and engage with our contractors, either for our flood mitigation schemes or for our pump station upgrades, there'll be two different parts of that strategy for each of those tranches of work. We will be reporting to demonstrate how we've followed that process and the outcome of that, and identifying who our preferred contractor is. So they won't make the decision on who the contractor is that we will be awarding the contract to. They'll be checking to make sure that we've followed the process and that's delivered an outcome with some probity assurance independently on that too. Did I cover everything?
Yeah, cover it. I've got a subsequent question.
Can I, oh, if it relates directly to that,
Yeah,
then,
it does.
yeah, okay,
Yeah.
carry on.
So I used to be, anyway, I used to be indecisive, but now I'm not so sure anymore on the basis of we're going through a economic crisis, and especially here in Hawke's Bay, there's some major issues happening right now while I speak almost. And we used to say, let's support local. Those who actually are here have already invested heavily, are seeking to do this work. But at the same time also, I want the cheapest job, done, the best money spent. Every dollar that we spend, we've got to be accountable for. That's why I'm not quite sure. And I don't know what and I hear you've gone to Auckland. Possibly we will have some outsiders that actually can do the job a lot better. But we're going to get, if that's going to occur, it's going to be pretty tricky for us as councillors. We will get it in the neck from our local people. Why aren't we chosen to do this work? And why do we have lots of workers sitting in housing that our own people are already in housing? Why are we actually bringing that extra cost? They're going to be very difficult conversations to have. So I just want to see what your operation is going to be going forward on that point.
Okay. I'll try and cover that off with a broad response.
That's fine.
So within our procurement strategy, we will be assessing our need and ability to deliver on progressive procurement opportunities. We have the opportunity to include a percentage of local contractors within our work. I'm going to split out the flood mitigation schemes to the pump station work. So the flood mitigation schemes is largely going to be earthworks construction. We have a great suite of contractors that did amazing work for us during the rapid rebuild, that have the track record and the relevant experience and the relationships with the program management office that can do the work largely. The exceptions to that, or where that may be challenged, is on the really big projects of Wairoa and Pukawhai. So we will be inviting open tender into our process to create a contractors panel for that work. We will be asking them to demonstrate where their local resources reside. What I can tell you is that the bigger contractors that we talk to in Auckland, they do all have people in Wairoa. They have people in the Hiratonga Plains, perhaps a little less so down in central Hawke's Bay, but those are smaller projects there, and I think that we will have the ability to award to local contractors within our panel if it fits. So we won't be going for lowest price conforming because we also need to manage quality. And as you've already pointed out, going fast doesn't necessarily deliver the best answer. Chris and I like to use the term slow down to go faster because you've got to get it all right to get the right answer, and it's the right answer that we're looking for. So totally appreciate where you're coming from with regard to the broader tensions within our economy within the Hawke's Bay. So we will be looking as best as possible to award to local contractors, if not on the main contract, potentially on enabling works that are required before the main contract kicks off. So we will look for those opportunities.
Thank you.
So I've got questions from Councillor McIntosh and Councillor Curtin and Councillor Foley. But what I also want to say before we get into that is that I'm of the view that the scale of this undertaking and the complexity of the structures and the range of questions that we have of councillors suggest that we should have a follow-up workshop on this. So I'm going to be asking the CE to organise that, and I'll see a few nodding heads around the room that suggest that that's a good idea. So that should take a little bit of heat out of otherwise somewhat concerning elements of this paper.
Will help us with our community as well,
Yep.
not just for our own benefit, but for community as well, when we get those questions.
Okay,
So it's a
so
benefit.
with that, Councillor McIntyre.
Just briefly, would it be your expectation that a mandatory response, especially as far as the larger contracts are concerned, would include peer review?
Yes, so I'd say, no, it's not a blanket yes. What I'm highlighting is where appropriate, we're already using peer reviews for key pieces of information. So for example, during the design phase, a lot of the modelling has been peer reviewed. Where there's uncertainty, we're having further work done. In terms of decisions around the freeboard in designs, we're taking that to peer review because that's a big decision that drives a lot of potential costs. So we're using peer review selectively throughout the process where it adds value and provides risk benefits is probably what I'd say is a philosophy. But I'm certainly not peer reviewing everything. We've got a lot of skills and experience in-house, and so we want to utilise that efficiently, but where it makes sense, we're certainly utilising a peer review process.
If I could just add to that, particularly where it comes to the pump station upgrade work, our likely pathway for procurement on that is a design build. So where we engage one contractor who will take responsibility for both the design and construction of that work. Inherently within that process, they'll have their own peer review to ensure that they are meeting best practice.
Councillor Curtin.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just want to go to the dashboard, the performance and risk dashboard, and in particular on the right-hand side, we've got a couple of headings called Recovery Transition. Hawke's Bay communities are reconnected and are better prepared and coordinated for future emergency events. And further down in that segment, design, science and modelling, the extent to which reliable data, evidence research and modelling is available, enabling long-term flood resilience planning. My questions are around, is this entity looking to take on, if you like, the early warning management components of this? So in other words, what does design, science and modelling and data mean, and coordinate for preparation and better preparation and coordination for future emergency events? So what does it mean for this group versus what is happening in other parts of the organisation? In the light, for example, that it's a big surprise to me that our early warning telemetry was something managed from the integrated catchment management side of the equation. So what is this entity doing in regard to that?
Can I just enter into this discussion? Sorry, and Neil, we need to, the term entity, we need to refer to this as a project. So this risk here is reflective of the uncertainty around project delivery. What you are seeing at the top end of that page is success to us in mitigating and managing this uncertainty. We are highlighting that at the moment there is an orange uncertainty around at the starting phase of this project. We are building flood resilience, or we are building flood projects to increase or mitigate the risk of flood to some of those communities. At this early stage of the program, we haven't met success of mitigating this yet because we have not built them. That is why that is demonstrated as an amber. We are yet to build. When we've built, we will provide further support to those communities, therefore bringing that uncertainty down. Because this project is implementing new telemetry into our network, because we have funding for that as a separate project, at the moment we are showing down here that there is a small uncertainty at the moment around delivery of that new telemetry because we haven't started yet. We don't have material concerns about what's there, but we will upgrade that telemetry.
It's not just also around that, it's around just the design and science that backs some of the decisions for the solution.
Yeah.
So there's obviously
So
some,
as an example, the NIWA analysis of return period for the event had uncertainty in some locations. So we're having to do further work to understand that uncertainty, which is why that's not green, because we're working through the issues.
I hear you. This exercise and one of the tables there is about transparency and certainty and assurance. I'm not assured, and I don't see where you've integrated, and I'm assuming as a part of the project, if you've just said that is there a separate project for early warning telemetry, is that separate from this, or is it integrated into it?
So the scope of the IPMO is the NIWA contract with the Crown, which incorporates a $5 million component for upgrade of telemetry. So we're working through the business case, but that wouldn't be interpreted as a brand new early warning system.
And I'm not suggesting that. What I'm saying is that we have part of the funding, and in this package, as a part of this program, is the inclusion and integration of telemetry and the early warning system.
Yes,
Is that correct?
Yep, so it's to upgrade the existing network, and there's some changes to gaps in the existing network. Yes.
Will that component of it sit with integrated catchment management and that set of staff, or will it come across or be assured through this process?
It is in the IPMO to oversee the delivery. Exactly how separate components are delivered is yet to be determined, and it may be some of the techs who are in ICM might deliver components of the job, but in terms of the assurance and the decision making, it's all in accordance with the framework that we've presented. Everything in the NIWA contract goes through this process, no exceptions.
Right, I'm going to take one further question from Councillor Williams, and then we'll move on to the recommendation.
Wait on, there's one more here. Was it, Charlie?
I said only two more before, so you might.
Oh, you did say me, Neil and me, you said.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, this is an incredibly important issue to us, huge project in context. So the attention to it is probably understandable. I just had a couple of questions on the risk dashboard as well. I initially, I think, got tangled up in the columns, and I was trying to track the columns from the top to the bottom, and I see each of the different rows, I think, is trying to do different things. In that say the bottom row dealing with risks and uncertainty is a collection of potential risks and uncertainty with a different colour or a different rating, but doesn't necessarily flow from the projects that sit above it in the previous rows, as I understand it. That's correct. In other words, for example, stakeholder and community alignment isn't specific to Whirinaki and Waiahiki. Correct? Right, okay. Look, it is a little bit difficult to sort of follow how it all fits together, but I was trying to align it with paragraph 27 in the chart, paragraph 27 of the paper, which has, for example, pump stations as green, whereas pump stations here are red. It has Waiahiki and Omahu as green, whereas Waiahiki and Ohiki Road Omahu here are yellow. And so I'm just wondering, I'm assuming that there is thought to be a greater degree of risk around Whirinaki, Waiahiki and Ohiti than, can you explain to me some of the factors that are informing those colours for those specific projects and how they relate to the colours that have been applied around the timeframes at paragraph 27? I'm wanting to understand where risk lies and why, essentially.
So Martin, if I may, it's paragraph 27 is around the timelines and schedules and the red, amber, green status of those, purely just on a timeline basis. What I would say is that these have been put in just for reference at this point. That these are draft dashboards and timelines that we're still looking to confirm and then come back and report to council on. So I don't know that this is a forum to get into the detail of these because they are just in draft. And they don't
Yeah,
answer the context.
I'm asking the question because I'm wanting to know which parts of our community are at greatest risk of either time or some other more substantive risk facing the project. So should we not read too much into the colours on this table at this stage? Is that what you're telling me?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Foley, last question.
Appreciate that, Chair. I just first want to make the point that there's public out there in a post-cyclone world and quite severely impacted, and they see the 250 million and think, great, there's going to be all this work done, and they're within existing schemes, and as we know, most of this is going to new schemes. But there is the 30 mil rapid repair, and in that table Councillor Williams is just referring to, that's just held for post-review. So to those people in particular that feel that that there is nothing really in this or the long-term plan at this stage, from what you know, is that 30 mil going to go far in terms of the reviews coming and what actions could be taken? And if it's way more than that, will that program of work drop into this framework as well?
So a few questions there. So the 30 million for rapid repair is kept specifically for those sites that have been repaired, and my understanding is currently can't be used for other general works under our agreement. So the reason it's pushed out a bit is we need to have a focus on some areas, but it's certainly not forgotten, and you can see there we'll get cracking into that. We're currently working through some detail in which areas where that should be spent, so some work is occurring, it just can't be readily seen, and some of that is the analysis of the NIWA work and understanding where some of those rapid repair sites stand in terms of the new 1% AEP. So I've asked for that analysis to be done, but it will take a little bit of time for that to come through, at which point we'll be then ready to scope some potential upgrades. Now, we also need to understand that it would be useful to know that those upgrades are sympathetic or at least aligned with the longer term direction of the scheme. And there's some areas where we'd probably want to test that. And so it's really the independent review coming in will provide some guidance. It won't be definitive guidance, but it's useful to understand what the narrative is. The Tonkin and Taylor work we want to bring to you guys in sort of a workshop format so you get some visibility of where that's heading. But the most important work is the current gap between the 1% AEP, the level of uncertainty in some of the NIWA work, and we're working through that. So as we answer those questions, we'll be scoping those up and incorporating them within the program to deliver.
Could I just also add that we do have a number of projects almost about to enter into execution phase, which is construction in and around the Central Hawke's Bay rivers relating to recovery from the cyclone. And the value of that work is collectively in the millions to repair riverbanks and erosion sites. So we have about a dozen projects in that space. Some Walker Road, for example, that have actually been completed, and in the Makaretu and the Waipawa above State Highway 50 bridge. Those projects all follow the processes that we've implemented for the NIWA program, although they report to the program board monthly, and then up through our standard channels for completion, as opposed to the program assurance group.
So the next question, I think, would any of that 30 million be spent for new projects? So the thinking is it will be spent for retro or additional work on areas already repaired. I think we need to assess the size of that. Once we know the size of that, we can go to Crown if there's any leftovers. In terms of funding forward program, look, we have no specifics yet on the forward program because we've got to work through options, share all the information here, share information with some of the other lifeline utilities about how it might fit in with some other major pieces of infrastructure and the cost of that infrastructure. So we've got a lot of work to do. It's very unlikely that the number there will fund that work. I think, you know, comprehensive overhauling of the Heritaunga scheme is in the 100 million plus type scenario. So that would be new money. And just reminding everyone, we continue to work as a sector for government to continue to co-fund a lot of this work. And so that'll be a live discussion going forward. And I think if and when we answer those questions about speed and pace and where the jobs are and the size of the program, is when we decide the best mechanism. And it could be to continue the IPMO, or we'd probably actually have a relook at what is the most appropriate mechanism to deliver that work. So there's a lot of unknowns, I think, in that forward pathway.
Thank you, Chris. Look, so let's go to the recommendations. Do I have a mover, please? Councillor Ormsby, and a seconder?
This is just to move the delegation, eh?
Yep. Oh, yes. Recommendations on the bottom.
Yeah. I'll
Yep.
just grab them.
Receive the paper and approve the recommendation. So, Neil, you wanted to?
Just very briefly, and I make this point that.
Sorry, you moving?
I did move.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, and now you're speaking to it. Thank you. Yeah. I didn't pick up that you moved.
Sorry.
I had it as moving and you said that it was
Give you
seconding.
snack there, councillors.
Unless you want to.
Already done it.
You go. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Proceed.
Mr Chair. Look, I just briefly want to make this comment around the project. It's a huge undertaking, and I've got absolute confidence that we can manage all of the risks around the financials, the contracting. We've got great experience in that regard, and absolute confidence around that. The area that I'm really a little concerned, or a little bit more concerned about, relates to the undertaking to what are we here for? And I'm reading the words: resilient infrastructure, essential services, public and critical lifeline infrastructure restored, made productive and resilient. Hawke's Bay communities are reconnected and better prepared and coordinated for future emergency events. That's just as important as the financial and contracting environment. We must assure the public that we've got it right, and we didn't get it right last time. So that's why I'm particularly focused on, if we are putting a hand up and got a contract in there for telemetry, it must work. And I'm just mindful of the paper we've got later in the day, where the report came back to us that said flood management device maintenance was inadequate. So we must assure that part of the program all the way down the line, keeping in mind that there are more things at stake than financial performance. It's protecting the community. So I'll be particularly focused on asking those questions meeting after meeting as to where you've got to, and assuring the protection of the community. Thank you, Mr Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Curtin. Councillor Ormsby.
Chair, just to support Councillor Curtin's comments and everything that's been noted, commented and asked on, the team you've heard where the areas we'd like to question and see more of in these papers. So I think supporting you, Chair, to have those subheadings within the papers going forward in the updates, so that we're really covering what we're seeking for, particularly for those communities who are impacted. But I'm happy to support these delegations. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Foley.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say well done to the team. This is a massive undertaking for the council, and so in one sense it's pretty exciting because it is a lot of money, and the capability it gives us is massive. Still just note though the apprehension across a lot of those communities, and we just need to do our best around the I guess the update and visibility of where we're at each and every stage. Just acknowledge John reminding me of all the good work going on down in CHB. It was actually a meeting on Monday with Orchardist that I was referring to around guys that have been impacted and wondering you know, what this and the LTP is in it for them. So I do acknowledge everyone across the whole Hawke's Bay that was impacted by the cyclone, and we are doing our best to, you know, address each and every community that we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foley. So we'll go to the vote. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. And thank you, staff. Look, it's, only to reiterate Councillor Foley's words, it's an enormous amount of work that everyone's desperately focused on.
Thank you.
Right, so moving on, what we'll do, go on to the CDM report now. I understand, so we've got a paper here. We've got a Doug Tate paper, which I believe, Nick, you're going to speak to.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, just noting that online we have Ian Maxwell and Chris Dolly, I think, is about to come back, who are going to just take you through a verbal presentation on some of the matters that Councillor Curtin just raised in the previous item around progress with telemetry and with some of our flood modelling work. But just to introduce the paper, the KEG, so it's the Coordinating Executive Group, who report up to the Civil Defence Joint Committee, were asked to put together a common paper that could be tabled at all councils in the region, which really has the effect of formally putting on your agenda the independent review that was carried out by Mike Bush Consulting, and so that's attached to this item. And accompanying that is a report from Doug Tate as the Chief Executive, who chairs the Coordinating Executive Group. So it's a common paper that has gone to all councils. Just by way of reminder of this council's particular role, we have a particular role around civil defence. Our first particular role is as an administering authority, and what an administering authority does essentially is to provide the employment home for people in the Civil Defence Group office, and we provide the resourcing to that Civil Defence Group office. However, the governance and the management of civil defence across the region lies under the ambit of the Joint Committee, and through them down to the Coordinating Executive Group. We also have a role that Councillor Curtin alluded to in the previous item around essentially contributing to the planning and the intelligence that goes on to inform the work of civil defence, and a particular role around the intelligence gathering around the condition of rivers and the potential impact of flooding. And our telemetry network is a key part of that. And as you've seen through, again, the previous item, there is a considerable investment going on into telemetry. As well as that role for us as a council, I sit on the Coordinating Executive Group, and so just wanted to highlight a number of the critical things that are going on in response to the review. The first of those is that the Joint Committee has asked to have, a little bit like we have an independent member on our Audit and Risk Committee, to have an independent member sit on their governance group to help them with the assurance that the work is being done in the right places in response to the review. Second critical job is that both the KEG and the Joint Committee realised pretty quickly that a dedicated resource was going to be needed to drive change and transformation for civil defence in the region. So we are about to start the recruitment process for a role to drive that change. Because civil defence is housed in an administrative sense in this council, that will be a position that we recruit for. So we haven't looked to, or we're going to look to use the potential funding that comes through the LTP to help support that role, but it's a critical piece in the jigsaw. At the same time, the Civil Defence Group Office then has done a bunch of work that's briefly highlighted in here in a practical sense to respond to the Bush report, ranging from the establishment of community hubs upwards. I think the next really significant piece of work is to be, and it's highlighted in the Bush report, is being really clear about function and roles of all of the many players in the civil defence system, and that ranges from lifeline utilities to primary responders to communities to mana whenua to councils. And so Jerry Mataparai in his inquiry drew a diagram of that, and it is an absolutely complicated spider's web of organisations. So one of the most significant things to happen in the next wee while is going to be being really clear about role and function. That discussion has already occurred at a principled level with the territorial authorities, and the principal approach being followed is as much of the operational delivery of response needs to be at place. So that is the relationship between local councils and marae, hapu, iwi, and community groups involved in civil defence response. The role of the group is much more around coordination, support, and in peacetime around quality assurance. Now that sounds easy to articulate. There's quite a lot of detail to put together to make sure that that's really clear. With those form and function things sorted out, those are the things that you then test and practice when you are in peacetime to make sure that your system is as good as it possibly can be. So that work is underway and overseen by the Joint Committee. The final thing, Chair, with your leave, I'd comment on is that there's lots the region can do, but the region on its own is not going to solve any of the issues of our ability to deal with major catastrophes and disasters. And Sir Jerry Mataparai's inquiry really highlighted that New Zealand as a country is not ready to deal with the size and extent of a Category 9 earthquake or similar. So along with what we do regionally, we are well connected into the discussions with the Minister around what NEMA and national agencies need to do. And a lot of our work around risk and hazard identification around the country is pretty detailed and needs a common platform and a common way of dealing and expressing it. So it's not a case of the region not getting on and doing what the region needs to do while we wait for something national, but there is a desperate need to keep what we do regionally coordinated with what goes on nationally to give the country a better footing for major disasters. At the right time during this paper, Chair, I know Mr. Dolly and Mr. Maxwell have some updates on some of our response as a regional council, but happy to do that when during this item you feel is appropriate.
Sounds like we could move straight on to that. That suits, otherwise I can take a round of questions, but if you've got more information, we might as well have that first.
Just getting the presentation.
Okay, oh look, in the meantime, Councillor Williams has got his hand up, so, and as well as Councillor McIntosh, probably others.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Look, it's a bit difficult with Doug not being here to ask questions about the paper, but specifically. But I am particularly interested in the issue of community response. I've got a particular concern about, I'm actually sitting on Cameron Road right now, which is where the chair announced that everyone should go in the event of a seismic event, the likes of which we heard about yesterday from the NEMA conference. And particularly, I think we are very exposed in Ahuriri Napier to a tsunami seismic event. So I'm just interested, for example, in whether any of the 60 community resilience hubs are in Ahuriri Napier, point one. And I don't know if anyone can answer that. I was interested in how one of the innovations was said to be that CDM empowered local community response. That's in the paper. But, you know, one of the recommendations of the Mike Bush report was that communities, volunteers, etc., were not well utilised by the CDM group in response to the event. So I don't know whether those are questions fairly raised now or at some other stage, but they are definitely issues troubling me at the moment.
Through you, Chair, I can follow up and get an answer for you around where those community hubs are planned. I think as an overall comment, what I would say is that a civil defence group office is not the right mechanism for driving community hubs at place. It is too small and too central to do that. What has clearly come out of this event is that a real impetus for that to occur and for people locally to know about that is the relationship between those local councils and their communities. And we've seen, I think, in Hawke's Bay over time, some of those functions get coalesced at a group level and begun to be distributed back out. And there's real impetus now to make sure that that distribution back out to place occurs, because operational delivery needs to be as close to those communities as it possibly can.
Chair, can I add to that?
Yep.
Just to help with the community hubs, Martin, I'm aware that Hastings District Council worked very closely with MPI to set up hubs around Hastings. In terms of Napier City Council, they are driving a neighbourhood hubs program that looks, I think, in Bayview, West Shore and Napier Hill. And I think they're more at the infancy stage of driving that. But what you do see are our district and city councils looking to resource and support these types of community-driven initiatives and hubs for people to be aware and know where to go in case of a disaster.
Sure. Look, I think we'll move on to the presentation, and that may answer some councillors' questions.
Yep, so I think I might kick off, and then I think Ian Maxwell will talk in a bit more detail on the telemetry network, etc. So this is just some pretty high-level comments of the work that we are continuing with, which will address some of the concerns and issues raised in the report, and you've actually seen a lot of this before in our most recent workshop around our forward strategy. I think to start off with, I think somewhere on the first page, it spoke around that if there were better maintenance practices, then the outcome might be quite different. What I wanted to point out for those who may not be aware is all of our infrastructure has a level of service. That level of service is effectively a 1 in 100 year level of service, and that's agreed through LTP processes. We heard from NIWA that on the big rivers the event exceeded a 1 in 1,000 year event in terms of the flows, and I just really want to point out quite clearly that when you have such a significant gap between the level of service and the flow, that infrastructure is simply going to be overwhelmed. So I thought that was a key piece of information, and obviously we'll work forward to provide potentially higher levels of protection or different levels of protection to different types of communities. But in terms of the flood forecasting and warning, a lot of this work actually commenced prior to the cyclone out of the 2021 LTP, and so we now have new flood forecasting models. So what used to happen is they had to be operated by a person. They took several hours to run, and if you're running multiple models, that's a full-time occupation, effectively. Those models now work for our big rivers. Again, not every river or catchment is modelled. It's our big rivers. They just run in the background now, running 24/7, and so there's opportunity to improve how we interface that information with the community. It's also important to note that as a sector, there's work being done to ensure we have some common platforms between regional councils, so that our regional council probably has 2 specialists in terms of flood modelling and that sort of information, so it makes it, quite challenging in a big event with 2 people. But by having some consistency within the sector, what we hope is that we can swap people out and borrow people for those technical roles. And Met Service and NEMA are also involved in those conversations to ensure consistency, and also for Met Service, who's a provider of that data that goes into those models, understands how they're being used and some risks around their use. And also very much looking for the standard interface. And so that's the improved interface with community. We know that a lot of our community-facing stuff is quite difficult to interpret if you don't know what you're looking at. And so there's some work there. We know we also have some systems where we have people's phone numbers and we call them. Those type of systems are very difficult to keep current. And so looking at more sort of subscription-based texting type services that people can keep their own numbers up to date with the service. So that's still all work to do, but what I'm trying to highlight there is the direction of travel. The other part is around not being static. We're not simply patching up the old flood networks. We are really going through what we're calling a reimagining of our flood resilience. And once again, we've been busy with consultants working through that. It's getting at the point where we can now start sharing within council and with some of our Lifeline partners where that work is heading. And we've certainly moved away from the tradition of just building things bigger and bigger. And looking at a wide range of options. That's going to require conversation with the community about how they want our flood resilience infrastructure to look, and perhaps some of the options that might be available to us. So that work, I think, will carry on for the next year or so to gel into some sort of shape. We're really getting towards the end of some of that technical assessment, and ready to sort of look at what's viable and what's not viable, and engage. Obviously, our schemes are being enhanced, and we've got some new schemes being built, and we just went through a paper on that in detail, from all the way from Wairoa to Parongaho, and improving our resilience to floods. And I guess we're continuing to transform how we do asset management. So we've invested $4 million into an enterprise-wide asset management system. So that integrates with our financial system, and it really brings us into the modern times with mobile computing, so apps on our workers' phones, to manage and have greater visibility of conditions, raising defects, and actually having a really good information about our assets, where we don't have to trawl through a paper-based system to find out what's happened. So that's really important. Will give us a lot more ability to analyse where our money is best spent.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask a question regarding that slide.
Yeah.
How many more slides have you got?
Oh, one, I think. Yep. One or two.
Just while this one is up.
Yeah.
Are we bringing community along with the fact that we actually are now using the word flood resilience rather than flood protection? And do they understand what that means?
Yeah. So I'd say internally, we've started using that language. Certainly with discussions with Mike and our team there, that's the direction we want to head. I think it's in its infancy in terms of how we are engaging with communities around that. I think it will be a core plank of our engagement going forward on the options and decisions around going forward. And I think it better represents some of the physical resilience have ceilings to, or limits to what they can provide. And I think that was a very important piece of feedback I found just talking to communities who were flooded, who probably didn't necessarily understand or appreciate that they were in a flood hazard area, and that the protecting assets had a limit to their level of protection. So I think the more people can plan for the black swan type events, or at least acknowledge that they can occur, I think that's the conversation. And there's many layers to that resilience. One is physical infrastructure, but it's to how you respond and how you may be ready, and general resilience within the community through the hubs and all those sorts of things. I think it builds many layers.
Sorry, Councillor McIntosh has a quick question.
Did I hear you correctly, Chris? So your recommendations on this, early 25 timing?
So we'll be coming to you in the next month or so in terms of some of the technical work that's been done to demonstrate the breadth or not of options in certain areas, so to really fill in the detail of where we're heading. Then we need to design, I think, an engagement process with communities, with our council, with other councils, with other lifeline infrastructures to work through that, and that's a thing that we're talking about designing that now, and it will probably take a year or two to work through to get it right. So what I've previously said is the backstop is probably the next LTP, where a lot of this might hit decisions, but it could potentially occur earlier if it occurs faster. So I haven't put a firm time frame on it. I think it's one of those things we want to get it right rather than rush off and start building things. We're going to be very busy building things for the next 3 years, so it's unlikely that we're wanting to be adding to that portfolio.
So we get an initial steer from you in a few months.
Yeah, and then I think it's a bit of a co-design piece about how we want to work through this, and how do we engage with the community? Do we use some of our typical instruments around annual plans or LTPs? Is it a special consultation? There's just a whole lot of, and we don't want to go off and create a plan. We just want to get some of the detail in front, have a bit of a discussion, and then we can fine-tune a bit of a plan going forward. That's, I think the key thing here is post-cyclone, one of the key helpful pieces of information is that all of our schemes are being reviewed. So we're well on our way on a couple with the Heretaunga and Upper Tukituki, but by 2026, all of our 25 schemes, we've had a scheme review to really understand the impact of climate change, the current level of service with the current tools. So in the last 20 years, a lot of the assessment tools have improved markedly with computing power and things like that. So we can do much better analysis now than when some of those schemes were designed. And of course, we commenced that work again before the cyclone in the last LTP is when we agreed on that program, but it has been turbocharged, so to speak, with that additional funding coming in. And highlighted before, is I fully expect as we look at some of these schemes comprehensively that haven't been looked at for a while, we're going to uncover, particularly in response to climate change, investment required over the next 30 years to maintain those levels of service. Before the deluge, of course, is the sector working with government around a business case for co-investment in flood resilience infrastructure. So we're continuing on that journey as a sector. This is just highlighting it's not all about protecting. There's multiple facets of not putting people in harm's way to begin with, and maybe strengthening some of those avoids And we also know the government is continuing that work on climate change response, which may incorporate retreat, but also maybe protecting in the short term. And again, highlighting, look, best practice in this area is around floodplain management plans. We've had a lot of internal facing documents about how we might respond. These flood management plans really work with communities and the other district councils and tangata whenua to really highlight all of the flood-based risks in the floodplain. And so again is a much improved external facing tool that we can also use to try and protect floodplain areas to avoid new developments being put in harm's way, and trying to do that through statutory protections and district plans, etc. And I think that's really it. And then Ian's got a few comments on the telemetry network. I'm happy to take questions. We might move. Sorry.
So just, are there any further specific questions on Chris's? Laura.
When's the likelihood of the fast track application being recognised in terms of the severe weather warning that we got to submit in a couple of months ago? Because it's about flood resilience, right?
So you're referring to the fast track legislation?
Yeah, that last point you had on that.
Operational management plans.
Yeah, right.
So operational management plans is really formalising how we operate things. I think the Regional Council has operated its schemes quite informally. Again, there's a lot of paper-based systems. That's actually linking those operational management plans in with the scheme reviews to optimise some of those management practices. So that is, I think, some time off. First, it's dealing with all of our urgent issues in getting the NIWA work underway, which also hits into which is more than just the effort of the IPMO. So a lot of the engineering capacity sitting in asset management is contributing, particularly at the front end, to standards and designs and things like that. They'll then get into some of these flood management plans, and then the next step there is to document to a higher level our operational management practices. So that's, probably several years off, to be honest. Yeah.
I just got a supplementary question. So that's based on the 2021 identification of projects?
No, these operational management plans are about, say we've got a drainage scheme.
Yeah.
It's how we go about managing some of the standards, some of the protocols, some of the set points. So if floods get to a certain point, this is when you open the gate. Again, a lot of that exists, but it's in a broad range of places, and it's about bringing that information together. So it's not in relation to any particular event. It's just best practice, again, for asset management and operating schemes.
Okay, and that's just to try and reconcile the 1 in 100 year event with the 1 in 5,000?
Not so much. It's just your everyday activities. Particularly with drainage and set points and how pumps work. And so what that means is you have a really considered way of operating, and it takes away some opportunities for operators to make changes that perhaps then the asset owner is unaware of. It's a classic sort of system in utilities, and it's actually just getting some a high level of assurance through the whole process. Yep.
Thank you.
Councillor Bowley.
Thank you, Chair. Chris, just talking to the guys up here in Hiratonga that were watching the overtopping on the stop banks, and they said, the stop bank integrity was fine at that stage, and it was the coming over the other side, eating away.
Yeah.
And so you talk about this overwhelming and this 1 in 1,000 event, and we're only providing 1 in 100. But if the overtopping occurred but didn't sort of eventually break into stop bank like it did, and 90% of the water still went down the river, then, so I guess this is more for the reviews to come than the civil defence, but it could be just, we think we have to build higher or out or something. It could be just the angle coming down or the material and not as hard a fix as we think.
So I think you're right, you know, one of the options is to have a different design philosophy for our stock banks, or it might be they're built that way in certain areas, for example. So it's all about knowing what's going to happen in an over-design event. And I think there's a broad range of things that Tompkins and Taylor are looking at, so we'll bring that to you for an initial sort of expose and then plan moving forward. But yeah, that yep. And then it's also understanding for an even bigger event what is likely, what is possible. So we don't like to think about that stuff, but if we had an even bigger event, you know, what's possible, and how could we minimise harm? So it's really asking that question to the maximum probable flood. What's it likely to do, even with an improved scheme?
Okay, so should we move on to telemetry?
Yeah. Ian, yeah, I'm not sure if this is yep, there it goes. Do you want me to be the pointer?
Thanks, Chris, if you could. Morena Koutou Council. So look, just a reminder, Chris, just jump to the next slide, please. We have brought you information about improvements we'll be making across the system. This just gives you a most up-to-date view of all of that. And perhaps just context too, Councillor Curtin asked a question around how does it work between ICM and asset management. Perhaps the way to think about it is that what you've been presented here in terms of the telemetry is the systems and the equipment that create the data, and the data is then brought back and shared with multiple people, including asset management, who turn that data into information. The information is then used for decision making. That's kind of the way to contextualise it, and probably importantly, I think it would be useful that Chris and I just spend a bit of time making absolutely clear for you how those relationships and how they work. So this is about the data collection. One of the gaps that we had that we brought to you several months ago was around our contracts and service level agreements. We have now resolved those largely with Vital, who are our Karanaki provider. So we have a contract and a service level agreement that requires problem identification within 4 hours and then a fix within 12. We provide information to FENZ. We operate sites for them, and we've tidied up a contract with them, so we're all clear around our roles and responsibilities there. And we're in the final process of finishing the contract in the SLA with Communicate, who run the digital mobile radio system, and it's a similar level of service provision that we expect from Vital. Some of the testing we've done, just reconfirming at Karanaki, we now own all of the equipment, and we have a regular automated report on battery status for us, with a battery bank that can run on standby for a couple of days. There's regular testing and inspection of all of the physical connections and equipment within our own building and at Dalton Street. We have a full set of replacement equipment for our key analogue sites at Karanaki and Mount Misery. So that's basically, we have the ability to go and pull everything out and plug in a complete new set and run those, rather than trying to run multiple diagnostic tests. We can just swap everything out. And we've also tested and will continue regular testing of the connection between Guppy Road, the works group, and Dalton Street, so that we know we can confidently run the telemetry system from either location should there be an issue in one side or the other. We've got redundancy. Just go to the next slide. Thanks, Chris. The DMR radios that we've talked to you about before, probably the most significant step we've managed to achieve is the automated switch between analogue and digital. So at the moment, the system is configured to primarily operate off the digital system, which, reminding you, has multiple what we call nodes. So there are numerous repeaters across the region, and the system has the ability to swap between repeaters should one go offline. It simply finds the next available one and starts communicating via that. So it has that built-in redundancy. But we've also, at our important flood warning sites, set up the ability to switch completely off the digital system and onto analog and do that remotely, so that if the digital system fell over, which is highly unlikely, we have an automatic backup system in an old-fashioned analog system. Another area of risk that we've identified with the digital system is that it relies on a fibre connection for some parts of its communications. So we've set up a microwave connection to allow us to bypass the fibre network if that's required. It will otherwise work through a fibre system, but if we need to, we can microwave the information directly back to Dalton Street. And we're setting up a site in Taradale to connect the northern sites through that microwave system. And we're filling in some gaps in the digital network, so we're just sort of taking a absolute belts and braces approach to ensuring that we've got comprehensive coverage across the whole region. So a couple of new sites are going in, and again a reminder that just means that there's more sites available if some do go offline. Across the next slide, thanks. Site upgrades. So you'll be aware that in many locations, all of our equipment was effectively destroyed because it was attached to infrastructure like bridges. So that was a learning for us. So we're, and I'll show you some photos shortly. We're basically taking an approach that we're practicable avoids the use of bridges, as long as we're confident that the location and the system provides a high level of performance. We'll move away from bridges, and we've rebuilt some sites. You can see we've rebuilt Ruakatū, and we've rebuilt Puketapu on the Tūdaikuri as well. But we've got another piece of kit that we're going to go in there that I'll show you shortly, and that's the swinging booms, which effectively is a cantilevered device that is attached to a bank, and we can swing equipment out across the active channel and swing it back in for maintenance and those sorts of things. Naroto Road on the Tūdaikuri is probably one of the early sites that we'll put in one of those booms and get it up and running. And we've started our upgrades that I've mentioned before with cameras that allow for automated flow measuring. So we're trialling a range of camera types at the moment. We've got 4 out at 4 sites there that are noted to check performance, and then once we're satisfied that they operate effectively, we'll roll out more of them. The value of the cameras obviously is not just that it gives us a instantaneous flow record, but we will make those cameras visible to the public, and those cameras will have visibility of the river 24/7, and people can see for themselves where the levels are at. And we're looking at and working with Chris's group and Civil Defence on whether we put in things like staff gauges with green, amber, red sort of indicators, so that we can say to people can see what's going on themselves and maybe make some decisions early based on what the cameras are showing them. So that's an initiative that we'll follow through on. Next slide, thanks, Chris. Which I think is almost the last one. And the final piece is the system upgrades. So that's the back-end software servers that make the whole thing work. So we've got a new server running Hydrotel. We're also in the belts and braces approach looking at the use of Starlink to make that connection between Guppy Road and Dalton Street. Again, avoiding a fibre connection, or in the event that actually we have a microwave failure as well. So it's an area we haven't tested yet, but we're looking at how that would work. Staff who are on call to run the system have got the ability to run in remote locations or at home, completely independent and offline of power, so they can monitor the system. If we have power cuts, including power at home, we can continue monitoring the system. I have talked to you before about effectively the third level of communication that we're putting into some of these critical sites as well, which includes the use of satellite comms and cellular. So we've got 12 sites that will have, and these are again important flood warning sites that will have 3 forms of communication: the digital, the analog, which can be switched automatically. And in the unlikely event that both digital and analog fail, we've got mobile coverage and or satellite, just recognising that the latter two, particularly satellite, is an absolute last resort, but it can't be polled and is subject to satellite coverage. But it gives us another option should we find that all of our radio systems fail. The team have spent the summer getting to our backcountry rain gauges and calibrated them and done comms testing on all of those as well. And we've made some changes to link stations and, like I said, replaced them with microwave to deal with the problems that we've had with radio connections in the past. And at the moment, and it has been for some time actually, our telemetry system is operating at fully 100% capacity and delivering flawless data back to the organisation. Last slide, thanks Chris, which I think is just some photos of those booms. So it just gives you an idea of the types of installation. So the Tudaikuri at Puketapu is an interim fix, and like I say, we may end up putting a boom somewhere in that location and or look at the bridge. And the swinging broom type setup on the left-hand side is that sort of thing we're either going to have built ourselves or have a third-party contractor install it at Ngārato Road on the Tudaikuri to test its efficacy for other sites across the network. And that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Chris. Very helpful presentations. Open for questions. Macintosh.
Ian, do you think usually when you have something like Gabrielle, stuff happens and the system doesn't work as intended? And in Gabrielle, Kahuranaki was an example, some of the telemetry going down was an example. Do you see a place where actually rely on people a bit more? By that I mean, at critical areas, you have a trusted person in that area that you can contact and say, look, I'm worried about the level of the river where you are, tell me about it. Because, sorry, further context to that, because we did get some phone calls from people, I think, who said, look, it's pretty bad up here, but it didn't really get through to where it was supposed to get through.
Thanks, Councillor. Look, I think 2 parts to an answer for that question from my perspective. Really, that's probably a question that we might build into the warnings and the notification process. We equally do have, like landowners, most of our sites, not all, most of our sites we access private property to run them, and we have really good working relationships with those landowners, and the landowners we often use to go and check, you know, for example, if comms have gone down, has an aerial tipped over, has the solar panel been damaged, so they can do the initial first quick check for us. But so that kind of deals with our equipment side of it. In terms of, you know, do we rely on people looking at and monitoring rivers? I think that's a really useful question to consider in the further development of the whole model and the approach in terms of how we work with community in this space.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you. Again, yeah, that was all very reassuring and consistent with what I think we've heard before, as to some of it at least, around the telemetry. I'm wondering if Chris could go back to about the third to last slide that he shared.
Was it site upgrades or?
Site upgrades?
Yeah, if you put the slides back up on the screen. No, back to the ones that Chris spoke to. Back, one more. That's it. Whoa. No, go back. Forward one. Thank you. I've asked this question before, Chris, but just refresh my understanding. In the world before Cyclone Gabriel, we were progressing about $20 million worth of work on the Heretaunga flood protection scheme towards the 500. And I have had a sense from you that some of that funding is kind of on hold, at risk, being renegotiated with Kanoa in terms of pausing it while we work out the implications of the Tonkin and Taylor and independent flood reviews. Would it be possible to sort of get a breakdown on where each of those individual elements of that program are at, where they got to, what's been paused, what the status of the funding is? And yeah, just really where all that's at. You could perhaps just give a very general picture now, but perhaps just a little table or something would help me kind of understand and have a holding picture of that when people ask me about it.
Yep, so look, we can get something through. I think at a high level, Kanoa have just agreed to our variation yesterday. So we haven't lost any funding. It's just been redistributed into useful projects while we wait for the more wholesome information about the future direction. But we can provide a breakdown of what's in that contract. It's effectively continuing design on a number of locations: Omaranui, Motio, Clive, or East Clive. It's undertaking some comprehensive geotechnical catalogue across all of our network, introducing some new work such as the recommissioning the Maraenui Golf Course stop bank that was decommissioned, and to formally continue with our gravel extraction in the Upper Tukituki. So that's sort of a broad range, but we can get you a more detailed piece of information.
John, we've lost you. You're on mute.
Yeah, just a little one pager on that'd be great. And the follow up to that is I was intrigued by Councillor Foley's reference to the rapid repair, which when you look at the table in the paper on that refers to stop bank height increases. Are those centred on places where you had damage in Cyclone Gabriel, or are they centred on places where we were doing this work under the IRG? What are the priority factors for where you might raise the stop bank height?
So the 30 million in the NIWA is for going back to locations that we repaired
that were damaged.
Cyclone. We repaired them to the old 1% AEP, and it's provision to bring them to a new 1% AEP, and that's just the work that we're working through at the moment.
Yeah.
And it's really earmarked for that. We don't have a lot of ability to use it for other things at this point.
Understand. Thank you. That's been very clear. Thanks, Chris.
Looking for further questions. In the meantime, I'll throw one in. I think this is probably for Nick. I'm looking for an understanding of our overall process of monitoring for governance of our own work programs that respond to the recommendations of the reviews, including the Bush Review, and our oversight of the work that the KEG is doing on the CDM. So is there a plan for a structured way that we can follow and understand the work as it progresses? I mean, we know there's some big chunks of it around our fossil, our NIWI work, but there are other things like telemetry and others. What's the system that allows us this ongoing oversight, please?
I think that's something that open to that ongoing discussion about, because I think this council has a role in focusing on those things that are in this council's power. So I'd like to get away from just having a verbal update like this to something as a more formal reporting mechanism, open to how we do that. I think that the reporting that KEG does in a governance sense goes to the Joint Committee, and that's a legal process and requirement that sits in in the civil defence legislation. So I think this council doesn't have so much of a governance oversight of CDEM, but it does of our own response and having to put that into some more formal papers.
Thank you, Nick. I appreciate your enthusiasm for having a structured approach to our level of understanding. I'm just making the point as before other councillors get in there that whilst we don't have direct, we don't govern the joint committee, we're all vitally interested in, and for our own systemic understanding, we need our own understanding. So, yep, thank you. Happy to do that. Questions?
Can I just ask a question?
Yep.
About,
Councillor McIntosh.
a question about Doug's report. I'm conscious we've talked a fair bit about making hay slowly and all those good things, but the next big thing could happen during this meeting, be it flood, tsunami, or whatever it is. And under the section on immediate actions, I'm unclear to what effect that is, what extent that has happened. And I'm thinking of particularly things like enduring things. We were not good at engaging, we'll call it Māori emergency management post the cyclone. That seems a pretty quick thing that we could put right straight away. So my question is, have we taken the information we've got via our own experience and the reports, and are we turning some of that stuff that's obvious into action now?
Yes, the most critical piece underway straight away was around community hubs and community engagement, and the territorial authorities have picked up that challenge. So they are working with the CDEM Group Office to do that. Hastings has taken a particular lead, Napier not too far behind. So that work is ongoing. The Joint Committee has brought into its fold mana whenua representation, and while the legislation kind of prevents voting, to all intents and purposes those people are part of that committee. I think the next really critical stage is getting that distributed model of operations out and formalised. So the group office will never be the place that connects with every community and every hapu and every marae. That needs to happen locally. So that thinking and work is underway. Appointing somebody to run it all, and I know that sounds quite bureaucratic, but you actually need somebody to be there driving it. Otherwise, it doesn't happen quick enough.
If there are no further questions, we can go to the recommendation, which is just that we receive the report. Do I have a mover for that?
I'm happy.
Councillor Orsby and a seconder, so Dan Beek, speaking to the motion.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I'd just like to add to all the great discussion in this item that the core focus for the Joint Committee is transformation of our civil defence in the region. And that's from a bottom-up perspective, with the community being at the heart. To do that, we need to make these changes, these improvements based on the recommendations through a driver, which we're going to market for now as a director, but also having the right advice around the governance group with an independent. So I think we're making the right steps in the right directions based on what our community has actually fed back into this report, which is crucial. I'd like to acknowledge also all the staff involved in the response and the time that they spent in putting their views in, as well as all our other lifelines, police, FENS. So this was a cross-organisational capturing what we need to do going forward to make those steps and change. So I just really acknowledge everyone involved. Kia ora.
Councillor Van Beek.
Yeah, and I understand definitely after Cyclone Gabriel it became really clear that marae and churches were the ones that continued to do this kind of work and continued to do that work. They had the legs to do it, whereas individuals didn't. Some smaller communities definitely did. It sounds like listening to see that The TAs are going to do some of the work in actually mapping and finding the local communities. We know where the marae and the hapu are, and they make themselves known very clearly, and that's really good, and that's a good structure they've got. Unfortunately, we don't have that in our rural areas, and I really hope that every citizen of Hawke's Bay is going to be accounted for under a community group. That will be the ideal outcome, because a lot of people live, and we can't even say ratepayer because we've got lots of people actually not ratepayers, but they are citizens of Hawke's Bay. So I surely hope that this message will get across that every citizen should be accounted for under a community group. So if we have a cyclone, if we have a tsunami, if we have an earthquake, that at least we can reach out. And I fully understand CDM is not the entity that can do that. So we need to make sure that we have got a process in place. And if that process is not in place after us continue to question, that we put at least seek to put something in place and or assist those who are able to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Sorry. Laura?
Just a comment on the report. So I'm not sure, I live in Bridgepa, aerodrome straight across the road. My community sounded like a war zone. We didn't even know what was going on. We have two marae in our community. We have a civil defence chapel in our community. We saw things being lugged in and out, no communication with us. And that just leads on to Jeff's point about utilising the communities that you use. Yeah, one community that stands out is Bridgepa because of the aerodrome and the 18 helicopters that were there, going up every 20 minutes, all the pack and save trucks that were there. The fact that Napier was cut off from everywhere actually highlights the need for our community within the CDM responses. So given our location, 6 minutes from Hastings CBD, across the way from Kahuranaki, telemetry, we're the lifeline, which is why we te pito, ne? We're the lifeline. So more consideration needs to be given to communities such as Bridgepa that have the infrastructure in place. And that's just from my perspective. To awhi, our communities like Omahu, like Waiōhik, and help to offer that support like with Porangahau and Waipatu. I can speak to that.
Councillor Curtin.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to, I do want to reference the review document itself, and I want to go into with some detail without boring everyone. But documents like this and reviews like this are really important for the community. This is a review of what happened. I haven't heard much about that today and the impacts on the community. And part of our job as elected representative is to bring the views and reflections of the community to the table and bring the pain of the community to the table. And this document, which I've gone through with some detail, at least I'm grateful for the community voice that has been brought forward in the various quotes that are there. So I'm grateful for that. I have some significant disagreement with some of the outcomes of it, but I would have to say that accountability is a very vital component of what we do, and this one of the aspects that we need to consider is these documents bring a measure of accountability. But I just want to start with the voice of those of the community, and it, to me, is captured pretty well at page 40. And I'll quote, "As the Barber family huddled in their roof cavity, furniture bobbling against their ceiling and floodwaters below, they heard a motor approach. The sound was a godsend for Chris, who 6 hours previously had been told by the operator to smash a hole in the ceiling and get his wife and 2 children out. He couldn't. Frantically banging on the roof, the family yelled out their whereabouts, and when the inflatable boats arrived, Chris asked its wetsuit-clad occupants, 'Are you guys from the Navy?' The answer was, 'Nah, we're just 3 Maori boys.' And that to me reflected what was going on the day, people stepping up. And I just want to acknowledge those people, the family traumatised by that event, and those 3 Maori boys. I want to acknowledge Ivy Collins, a little baby girl that lost her life. Really important to acknowledge what's happened. And I go to the body of the document itself, and I read at page 6. These lessons have been well traversed in previous reviews. The 2020 review of the Napier flood response found many of the same issues and recommendations. That document there, for example, the flood review. So we've had these documents before, and we didn't act on them. But I think the thing we need to concentrate on, and this it was pretty grim reading, wasn't it, going to pages 34, 35, 36. But the one that struck me particularly was, excuse me while I find the reference to it, the whole thing was an uncoordinated shit show. There was chaos, inequity of response, people in roles who tried hard but didn't know what they were doing. Most of the really useful stuff was done by the volunteers and community. We've got another quote here. GEC, there was chaos, no organisation, no focus, no structure, people everywhere, no disaster, people working in silos making poor decisions. That was the reality on the ground. And the conclusions that I see from the report, Hawke's Bay Civil Defence and Emergency Group plans were as sound as anywhere, but lacked the operational detail. The local CEDM Joint Committee and Chief Executives Coordinating Group had a history of working effectively. That's where I diverge from Mr Bush's report. How on earth can you say that the plans were effective as anywhere when, in another part of the report, it says there were no plans? There were no plans. There were no emergency plan, no flood plan. So I differ in that regard. The local CEDM committee and Chief Executive Coordinating Group, the SEG, in my view, top to bottom, a catastrophic failure at all those levels. Now, there are reasons for that, and I think right from the get-go, over 6 years, there were failings, if you like. The structure actually let them down. But at the end of the day, the people responsible were the Joint Committee and the SEG group. That's the end of it. That's where the buck stops. That's our role, and we as elected representatives need to acknowledge that that's where the buck stops. Where I also diverge with the report is that the emphasis came on the staff, and at the end of the day, it's the elected representatives and the SEG group who set the tone, who set the culture, who didn't insist on the delivery and performance of its various reviews. And at the end of the day, that's where that failure occurred. And finally, Mr Chair, it's about accountability. And what I haven't heard today is any accountability for what went on. There's no acknowledgement in this, and so far today, of what happened to our community and who was responsible. And I just want to acknowledge those people who suffered, and I want them to know that from my perspective, if I didn't do anything over the last 20 years to make things happen better, then I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Curtin, for those heartfelt words. Look, I am conscious that Councillor Ormsby, as our representative on the Joint Committee, may want to respond, and you're also free to reply as mover, but I just wanted to check whether there's anyone else who wants to speak to the motion. If not, last words for you.
No, thank you, Chair. And just to acknowledge what you're feeling now, Councillor Curtin and everyone around the table. And ever since Cyclone Gabrielle, we've been through with our communities these really difficult times, which is a huge reason why we insisted that these independent reviews had to go forth, and they had to go out to community. They had to talk to them, they had to receive those experiences, those who wanted to share. And we do have to take responsibility over the years of planning, of former reviews, of group plans. And what sticks out for us is that we need to do better in that accountability. And so setting the plan forward in terms of what's in this paper today, we can only but do better. And that's what we need to do going forward. So there is a huge task for us all, and it starts in the home, and we've heard today, building resilience within our home and our communities. And for us all to support those structures that flip from, I suppose, a heavy top to a heavy bottom. And we've heard the amazing work that our communities have done ever since then, are still doing today in their recovery hubs. So we need to keep supporting that movement while working together with government, because as you see in those recommendations and the National Inquiry, NEMA have not helped set us up with the right structures to do the best job we can for our communities. And so I think we have a huge role going forward in that. And so I think having clear lines of responsibilities and roles in terms of the group, our TAs, ourselves, down to our communities, is a start that we need to make. And I see in our long-term plan that we're striving to get there. And that's within our hold and control right now. So given that, Chair, I think I'll leave it at that. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Councillor Ormsby. So we will move to vote. So we're just noting the report. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Look, I apologise for the time creep. We're running way over. We do have some ability to spill into lunch, which is fantastic. And definitely an apology to our guests, Dan and Tom, for waiting patiently. What I will do is we'll just have a 2-minute break. Pit stop for anyone who wants that. Grab a coffee if you want, and then we'll go straight in to the HBRIC quarterly update. And just once again, thanks for the quality of To Dan and to Tom, lovely to have you back. We've got a paper and some financials, which we will take as read. And Tom, you've got a little update for us.
I have. Thank you, Chair. Kia ora, everybody. So just proposing, I think we foreshadowed in the paper that there was an HBRIC meeting to follow where some things were going to be advanced, and we'd report on that. And conscious of the fact that you're in an LTP process, and there's a lot of interest in in the investment portfolio. So I thought we just can give you a quick, so a little bit of a context piece for where we're at now, a little bit of background where we're at, where we're heading, and then we can just incorporate that into general questions around the paper, if that's okay. So, are you happy to bear with me for?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, just a brief summary for either public or new around this table. Regional Council does have an investment portfolio, and it is the product of a lot of history in terms of assets and property and leasehold land and outcomes of earthquakes that have ended up in the council's hand, and the key asset, obviously, is the Napier Port, that until relatively recently was 100% owned by council. And you've also got some forestry assets that are treated as investment assets, but are the result of regional council's operational activities in relation to land. HBRIC, which is the investment company, was formed in 2012, and I think principally it was intended to be a vehicle for the promotion of in the due diligence around the Ruataniwha Water Storage Scheme, but it has always also held the port asset, the port shares, and so following the sort of the end of the Ruataniwha scheme, the HBRIC played a very large role alongside council in the IPO process that culminated in 2019. Which generated a lot of surplus investment funds for the council group. And I think in terms of where we're at today, I think very early stages of this triennium, I think this table, led by the chair and deputy chair, we're very keen to look at the investment portfolio, the total investment portfolio, and ask questions around its structure and its performance. So quite early on, a process was started, I think, late 2022, to undertake a review, and that, of course, was intersected by Cyclone Gabrielle, and so I'm sure council would have preferred to have been a lot further down the track than they were. We are today, but there's been a lot of activity towards the end of last year in terms of the decisions coming through around that review. Just again, just in terms of...
Sorry, Chair, to interrupt. I'm wondering if we could share the slides on the screen. I can't see them.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Working on...
Apologies, Tom.
I'll rattle through while that's coming on. Councillor Williams, these are just indicative slides. Last year we undertook, got PwC to undertake, a summary of performance, because I know there's a lot of interest in the performance, and this is just of the HBRIC portfolio itself, and I think what it can show in the 10 years that it had been operating, notwithstanding Ruataniwha, the cumulative return on investment over that 10 years, 171%. And the average return on investment has been 14%. That's not compound, that's just it's straight line. And this sort of graph speaks to the sort of volatility of returns, and it's not uncommon, for investment portfolios to experience volatility, as they have recently. And so through that period, $118 million of dividend has been passed through from HBRIC to council to support council's activities and operations, which sort of brings us to where we're at today, because I think as a result of the changes that this council has made, have asked HBRICS to manage and advise over the entire portfolio because there are assets that sit on the HBRIC side and assets that sit on the HBRC side. And so you've asked that we take a portfolio approach to that, and we'll provide a breakdown of where that split is shortly. But we can see now the portfolio still is substantially dominated by the groups holding in Napier Port. Second to the managed funds portfolio, and I suppose if we put this graph up before the Port IPO, then the blue bit would have been a lot bigger and the orange bit would have been a lot smaller because the IPO did generate an enormous amount of capital, new investment capital for the organisation. And then there's a property portfolio in Wellington, and then I've just a small amount in relation to Food East and cash that HBRIC owns. But that's what I call the core portfolio of the group, not HBRIC, not HBRC, but the group. I don't really. This is indicative, and it's subject to tax review. But I'm just trying to give a breakdown of where those assets sit. So you can see HBRIC holds a portion of the managed funds portfolio. It has Food East, it's sitting on some cash, and obviously holds the Napier Port shares. HBRC has a much larger managed funds portfolio that's held strategically, and that Wellington portfolio, property portfolio, sits within HBRC. I've stripped out these other investment assets because they're a bit more complicated, and they're sort of subject to the review that we're undertaking right now, so that we're in a better position to advise council around next steps and options going forward. That includes a portfolio of leasehold land properties in Napier that was subject to a transaction with the Accident Compensation Corporation, I think in 2013. And so a lot of the proceeds from that transaction actually sit in the managed funds portfolio. And then these forestry assets. And looking just in the last few days, I've been on 3 of the forestry properties last week, and on Tuesday was actually in Wellington and visited all the Wellington properties and talked to some of the experts down there around those portfolios, just getting our heads around those portfolios. So the key issues here in terms of this, if you take, we've asked ourselves a question for the next year in relation to the objectives that you've provided HBRIC. Are we going, and we'll come to what those objectives are shortly. Do we have a good chance of meeting those objectives? And so we can see that we anticipate a cash return from the portfolio of around 13.9 million. Sorry, these haven't lined up that well. Capital growth in the portfolio of about 11 million, which would result in an overall performance on the portfolio of about 4.6%. Historically, we've performed much higher than that, but these I've tried to be conservative here, and there's also this is subject to a tax review because there's a lot of moving parts to how the portfolio needs to be structured that's coming forward. But kind of one of the key things here is that just for the purposes of this presentation, I haven't made any assumption around growth in the value of the port shares. And so we obviously have a very significant asset in the portfolio that we are not, I'm not for this exercise trying to make an assumption of 2 or 3 or percent growth in the value of that investment, and that in part comes down to the fact that that is an asset that is held. It's a strategic asset of council, and there's some very clear guidelines around how that asset can be dealt with, including the requirement for quite deep community consultation if anything's going to be done there. So in that way we sort of treat it as as an asset that we're going to hold in perpetuity, and so I've just put this in here at just what we think the cash return is going to be from that. And so that's but all these things will be part of the considerations we come back and talk to you about. So just a quick summary, our current priority is executing on the managed funds request for proposal changes that are discussed in the document. I think the last time I was at CNS we talked about the process that we'd been in around the managed funds portfolio, looking to increase, focus and returns out of that portfolio. We've initiated again a comprehensive assessment of those other assets, so we can better understand them and better come back and talk to council around what your options are and any recommendations. But our primary focus, is in response to council's direction that it wants more certainty around its cash dividend, and it's set the amount of $12.5 million of cash to be delivered from the group's investments. Continue inflation proofing, making sure that the portfolio is inflation protected over time, and establishing a future resilience fund to buffer volatility and investment returns, as we've seen, to make sure that there's certainty around council. And obviously we just continue to proactively work with the port, because it is such an important part of our portfolio. We feel it is it's a good team performing well, and so support them. So that's the brief summary. Councillors are really happy to take questions.
Yep, thanks, Tom. Look, Councillor Oldsley, a question.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Tom, for your presentation. That's quite a high expectation for a 12.5 million cash return, which we've set. How achievable do you think that is, looking at the environment that we are experiencing now, as well as ensuring the 2.5% inflation for HBRIC in the investments going forward?
Yeah, well, I can answer that. We're confident that we're going to be able to get that 12.5 million in cash. The port's had a good, solid first 6 months. The next week will be the market release of the first 6 months trading, but the volumes have been indicated publicly and they're looking strong. So, the port on its own will hopefully deliver a good chunk of that number.
Councillor McIntosh.
We've spoken previously at Audit and Risk about the eggs in one basket, in particular reference to the port, and understanding public consultation, strategic asset importance and that sort of thing. Is it so it's not included in what you're looking at the moment, but can we expect some recommendation from you on that at some point in the future? I'm thinking particularly from a risk perspective of the council's investment portfolio and having so much in that basket.
Yes, we are having discussions about that, and we're also aware, as you'll be aware, that around the country councils are are addressing that same question, and so we have the Auckland Council, Bay of Plenty Council, Christchurch City Council, Greater Wellington Council, and Environment Southland, all looking at strategies and consulting in the last 18 months on ports and airports and lines companies as to whether with this diversification question is sort of at the heart of that. So we're discussing that, and we will come back to you with some thoughts, in future.
I think if I could just add to that, so we're obviously acutely conscious of the consultation requirements, and so those are decisions for the table, really. I mean, as HBRIC, we have the investment, and we are trying to make sure that it performs as well. And I think in that respect, we are confident, that there's a great management team out there who have had some challenging times in the last few years with COVID and Cyclone Gabrielle. And it's kind of interesting because, the whole port IPO was conceived, to reduce, our exposure to the port. And I think at the time, the concern was an earthquake. What would happen if there was an earthquake? And so that was one of the drivers, for some of the objectives for the IPO. So, and again, has increased the resilience of your portfolio by having been able to move exposure out of the port into a managed funds portfolio. So that, so we'll as part of our overall assessment, we'll come back and we'll put in options in front of you. Councillor MB.
In that same vein, in the rural sector, we use when everybody runs, you walk, and when everybody walks, you run. So everybody wants to get out of ports. Let's die ho, and that may actually give us opportunities because we're in the port business. We could be in the port business and actually make it more effective. And the other part is we as a region are very much export led. So we actually want to make sure that our export community has got the ability to have somewhat control through us, through the port. So these are actually very important ideas to keep in mind. And when you come to us, I think you need to have those questions answered rather than just saying, financially it makes sense, let's get out of it. Because it's a very complex system that we're working in with a flow of material in and out of the port, and if you make decisions in very complex systems, you will have to encounter very complex unintended consequences, and so it's not an easy paper to write, I would imagine, and it'll be very far-reaching. So that's just my comment to make.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I probably sound like I'm in pains to do this. It's not a decision for HRIP, okay? And it is a very broad subject. And I think, again, going back to the IPO process, and Councillor Curtin was, an instrumental part of this. The way they approached that is they outline what are the key objectives here, and then therefore what options, support those objectives. And I think at the time, there were a number of factors, and you did own 100% of the port then, so it was a different time, and there was a wharf to be built and things like that. So there were multiple, I think there were 5 or 6 key objectives that were agreed, the key objectives, and then the options were assessed against that. So that's, that's a very long process, and we welcome any guidance you're getting on feedback from the community as you're going through your own LTP process.
So Councillor Williams and then Councillor Foley.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Tom. Look, a couple of questions. You touched on it right at the beginning there, Tom, to do with the meeting that's just been held. Paragraph 16, leaving the port aside. Is it too early to give us the update that's foreshadowed at the end of that paragraph around some of the preliminary thinking around alignment of the other assets with risk return objectives and the statement of expectations, where that sort of thinking's at the moment? That's my first question.
So, Councillor, I think that the comments are literally have been on the road and in the cars out reviewing some of these assets and getting to meet people and try and get a better understanding of what they are and how they perform. So, yeah, so it's underway, but I can't give you a fixed time. Hopefully, by the time we meet again, we'll be a long way down the track.
It's codified. Now, the other thing is Food East. We see this come up, completion of the building. The last part of paragraph 9 says is preparing the operational phase, focusing on internal fit-outs and setting up for tenant occupancy and events. Where is that project at in terms of tenancy and occupation?
So, Councillor Williams, yeah, we understand that we have that Food East have secured a tenant for one of the 4 bays in Building B, which is exciting. It's subject to that tenant getting a certificate from MPI. But no, so the tenancy journey has started. Hiwi is going to attend the Food East to do a blessing, an early morning blessing in the next week or 2, so they can get commence activities formally there. But there'll be a formal opening in June, I believe. But that board's working very hard. Our management team are working very hard, and it's just a matter of getting some momentum, getting some more tenants in there, and they're going to start holding events and networking and innovation type events. So It's a tough environment for that.
Yeah.
For the launch with the economy the way it is, but they are they appear to be doing, making progress, solid progress.
Thank you.
Councillor Foley.
Thank you, Chair. I do note, g'day Dan, Tom, I do note coming along the expressway nearly every week, just the development still going on, particularly down, what do you call that, Tumu Timbers area. It's just, considering the economy we are in, to still see growth down there is impressive. Tom, just first note, there might be an error in the capital growth figures for HBRC, but my focus is on cash, and so it's really good to see the trend line on the cumulative returns there. The trouble is over that same period, the general rates have gone up 100%, so we've seen this divergence of I guess, return of dividend from HBRIC and the money we're spending at this council. So perfect world would be great to see them reversed and lessen the burden on our ratepayers. So I guess my point is we've done the managed fund review with really good intent around driving, better performance from that group of assets. And when we look at these other assets, like Councillor McIntosh said, risk is an important factor, but the cash return has to be a really important driver here because, that's what this council's looking for to kind of offset some of these issues, particularly in this current long-term plan. We're just seeing, the cost of things and stuff, and so to try and, that's one approach is increasing the cash returns to lessen the burden on our ratepayers amongst, many other things we have to do within this organisation as well. Sorry, that probably wasn't a question.
No, but in answer to your question, Councillor, yes, and the expectation you have put on HBRIC is a rising cash dividend every year, and so we're acutely conscious that, that the portfolio review has to meet those objectives.
Yeah, that was the brief that was set out to the successful, all the people that RFP'd, so that's the plan.
Any questions? None. Do I have a mover to receive the report? Councillor McIntosh and a seconder. Councillor Foley. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Succinct, effective. Right, so, financial report.
And we're a residential road, we're not a state highway.
Oh, we are quite behind.
Should have been. And then they're going to put another toll between us and Buckingham. I said, oh, wow.
Welcome, Chris. Would you like to speak to it or
Yep, I can do.
lead us?
Yeah. So I'm not sure if everyone has met Pam Bicknell, our new senior group accountant. So she's up here and the main author behind these reports coming to here. I'll take the report as read. The key factors in there that we still get impacted quite a lot by some of the things like sediment and debris into the income and expenditure sides of the organisation, and when we look at it at the top level as a council, sometimes the comparisons between actuals and budget look quite large, but that is because some of the stuff that was not known about at the time that we put the annual plan together in there. Borrowings are continuing to be higher than we had expected at the start of the year, and a lot of that is because we had expected insurance and NEMA proceeds to be coming through a little bit sooner than they have been. They are now really ramping up in terms of the work that is being done with NEMA, and we're starting to expect to see some dollars coming through the door within weeks or so, which is really, really good. The full year forecast indicates a funding shortfall of about $6.7 million. This is principally due to the lower than planned investment cash returns for the year. coming in there. This will impact on our cash flow and working capital as we go through the year-end process. Yeah. To help counter some of the increased borrowing, we have spent quite a bit of time in researching around green loans to see and looking into a credit rating to see if we can actually reduce the costs of borrowing going in there. And other than that, we'll take any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Pam. Questions? Councillor Van Beek.
A investment 101 question, green loans.
Yeah.
So
the ladies are all dressed in green, but I don't think you're going and rate their purses, are you?
So the local government funding agency, which we do all of our borrowing through, they issue assets or debentures out to other investors that are green, so they have sustainability impact. So investors will accept a lower rate of interest because these assets that they are buying are helping the environment or helping sustainability and stuff like that. So that funding that the local government LGFA has, they then pass on to councils to actually get backed up by initiatives that we have, things like our erosion control scheme, that actually benefit sustainability or the environment so that the end investors have that good feeling and they cost us a little bit less in interest.
They do, however, come with them increased reporting obligations, so there is a slightly more administration around obtaining green loans, sustainable lending. Obviously, the proof that you need to give, but the administration of it, I believe, outweighs, the lower cost of lending outweighs the administrative burden in it places.
Have you got a margin that you know of that?
It's similar to my understanding. It's about 20 basis points. Yeah, it is similar, and then on top of that, hopefully with a credit rating, you might get a even more of a saving.
Good. Other questions? Councillor McIntosh.
Actually, just a question of clarification. The appointment of the new investment manager, in your report, it refers to Jarden First Cape, and in the HBRIC report, it refers to Harbour Asset Management.
Yes.
And is First Cape a combination of those two?
Yes. Sorry, so Jarden merged with First Cape. Harbour Asset Management is the parent company, as I understand, of that, and JB Ware also are in the mix at the end of May around a combination. So they are the same entity. Jarden, First Cape, Harbour Asset Management, they are a conglomerate of entities coming together to make one, is my understanding.
I think I understand. So Jarden, the people, Jarden people.
Yep, they're still there.
Yeah, and so is that the same entity that has previously had part of the portfolio?
Yes, so Jarden had part of our portfolio, as did Mercer. Now going forward, Jarden, you are right in the words that we're using, because even now I'm now going to struggle to say it. Jarden is now First Cape as part of the Harbour Asset Management Group. They are all merging. So Jarden has merged with that company to form.
So the three entities, three names are merging.
Yeah, I will clarify that with you, but it's yeah, they have merged to form First Cape.
I'm struggling. You did to acknowledge staff that is in the papers somewhere, and I think that I can't find the detail that I thought it was. It might have been.
I think it refers to two of them in the papers.
Councillor Foley.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Finance team. Gets a little bit confusing with that sort of debris funding all in mix there, but high level, looks like we're spending a lot less business as usual compared to budget. Without drilling in down to the detail of that, like how feasible is that to carry on? So I guess what I'm asking is if we were doing the long-term or the 24-25 budget today with this information, I mean, could we strip that back? Because we're not spending it this year. Who's to say we're not going to spend it next year?
I think the types of areas that are showing the big underspends in there are things that have been affected by the weather, so planting, and that has been quite delayed because of the dry weather going through there. There has been a reasonable amount of spend around the kotahi stuff with continued sort of engagement issues in there. We have been through in doing the forecast and looking at, in particular, those big areas of underspend as to whether they are sustainable going forward. And in a lot of cases, they're not. They will be actually more timing differences that up to this point in time, there has been delays that they are hoping to see finish off or reinvigorate that work in the last 3 months of the year, or potentially going forward into next year, which will become another issue in terms of our carry forward conversations at the end of the year.
Oh, you didn't give me the answer.
It is very complicated to demonstrate to you how these financials are working this year, because we are still seeing the remnants of the cyclone work coming through. So as we come through the next sort of 6 to 8 months, we will likely see the end of that. So you'll get back to a true baseline. It really is. Take the silt and debris out. Although it's in the financials and we have to report that, essentially it's a net nothing, right? It's coming in, it's going out. It's going to result in nothing for us. But the secondary factor, what you're seeing is, in the annual plan that we set last year, we anticipated up to $92 million of cyclone rebuild activity off the back of all the works through assets. So the plan in it had a high number, but what we're seeing is the actual is a lot lower. So that's a secondary variance that you're seeing within our budgets. And then the third piece is what Chris has just alluded to, the ins and outs of individual activities. Now, where you'll see that at a true level is if in the next item, which is the organisational performance report, where you've got that broken down at an ICM, at an asset management level, at a corporate services, etc. So you will see that coming through at an individual level coming up.
Councillor Van Beek, I think you had a question, and then Councillor Williams.
Yeah, coming back again to the green loan. According to the paper, it says that we ought to meet certain emission targets. When we don't meet those, do we then actually go and spend extra effort to actually go and try and meet those targets so that we actually can get those green loans, or are we generally within those targets?
So as an organisation, in terms of our targets, we continually meet those, albeit there is a regional-wide target of zero emissions by 2050. I think it is 2050 it says. Yeah, as an organisation, we continue to meet our emissions target. In fact, we over-meet it quite a lot, purely because of the offset we have in our forestry assets. So we are likely to continue to meet those with the green loan product, we believe.
Okay, yeah. I just wanted to make sure that we actually weren't spending lots of money doing things that we're not supposed to be doing, or out of time, not the right time, and trying to achieve these loans, but obviously we're making it. Thank you.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you. One of my questions, Chair, is on the same topic. They ask us for a 42% reduction from 2030 baseline as an organisation. By 2030 from baseline. We've got a hell of a lot of activity going on with our new PMO for stock banks, which is going to presumably involve a lot of diesel. And we might be divesting forestry assets. So I don't know. I mean, the picture's pretty dynamic. My question is really around paragraph 38. What are the consequences if we don't hit the target? Do we have to pay a penalty interest back to the standard LGFA rate, or is it just like naughty boys, you won't get another one?
No, Councillor, I think in the last part of the 38 there, it does say that any existing loans would be unaffected. We have 3 years of time to actually try and remedy what was happened there. If we went off track to try and get back on track, the real impact would be that not being able to get green loans going into the future. So it's not that we are setting ourselves up to having stuff on our books that we would then get hit with penalty interest.
Right, great. Just want to clarify that. I assumed that from what that said, but I just want to be sure. My other question, Chair, if you'll forgive me, is we get a lot of figures quite frequently, but I've never picked up anything as stark as the statement of financial position in terms of investment in council control organisations. This is on page 33 of the agenda. We had a prior year value for presumably HBRIC at 348. It's now 265, and we had a budget of 522. Just how that's precisely, in other words, it seems to me the asset value of HBRIC's half what we budgeted it to be. How did it go that wrong? Is that simply the share price and the port, or what is that?
Okay, so I'll take this one. Unfortunately, there is an error in the report that we only just picked up just before we came and sat down in here. The fair value gain, so the unrealised gain parts around the port valuation as part of HBRIC were inadvertently not added to that figure in there. So that figure should actually be 335 million. And on the other side, the fair value reserves, about 10, 12 lines down, should be 275 million rather than 205 million.
Right, was that an answer to my question?
So then compared to last year at 348 million, the value of the investment controlled organisations is currently 335 million, and that does reflect a slight decrease in the share price of the port.
Okay, but why did we budget an assumed value at 522?
So the budget was based on some of the assumptions that were included in the last LTP, which had some heroic assumptions around managed funds and the port price recovering, mainly having, seeing that we would actually start getting back up to LTP levels now that COVID had died off a little bit, but unfortunately the cyclone then put a damper on all of that.
Thank you, Chris. That's been helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just a simple question from me around the credit rating process. I think it's taking longer than we expected, and should we be concerned?
Really good question. And we have had some indications from Fitch as to what the outcome is that they would propose. The outcome is not what we expected, and we are currently working with internally to respond to Fitch on some assumptions they've made in their calculations. The outlook or the rating that an entity is given is looked at past performance as well as future. We've had large operating deficits in this organisation since the cyclone and leading up to current. They are aware of that, and there is a large weighting being given to some of those deficits. We're also aware and investment assets aren't counted, etc. So there's some challenging conversations we need to go back with, just challenging why. And we will come back. We will come back when we have a rating, but at this stage we're still in discussion. We haven't got one, not one confirmed.
Thank you. Laura.
Oh, well, kia ora, thank you through Chair. This is just a whimsical sort of comment. Have we ever thought about our asset base in the rivers, what that looks like, how we evaluate our rivers, because then we can show some depreciation somewhere, we can start economising the river. Yeah. Is there any thought around that?
So we have stock banks, we have a large range of infrastructure assets that we carry on our balance sheet. And they are valued every year. We have external valuers do that. So we do show a value in those. And every time we build a stock bank or we have a program of work, we capitalise that. So we're constantly adding to the value or decreasing, obviously, after a cyclone. So yes, we do acknowledge the value in those sort of infrastructure. Not necessarily river beds, etc. But yeah.
Yeah, it's a real whimsical thing
because
it's an economy of scale. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. If no further questions, would someone like to move the paper?
Happy to.
I'll offer it once. Councillor Foley, and a seconder.
You've got a hard crowd to please.
McIntosh. Right. Would you either like to speak to that?
Oh, I don't think so. We're moving on to a similar report next, so happy to.
Right. No further speakers. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Organisational performance.
Oh, you poor fellas. God, this sneaky. Yes.
Can I welcome?
I'm the last one on, I think. I'll take the paper as read. It's our Q3 of our financial year, the last year of our LTP, and just to summarise that we have an executive summary that gives the highlights of the quarter. So this is the quarter from the 1st of January until the 31st of March 2024. We have around corporate metrics from around 7 of our sort of corporate business units within our corporate services as well. So it shows the trends over the years. We track our levels of service measures. Obviously, Q3 is quite crucial because next quarter is our annual report. So if there's any off track, it's good to pick those up. And then I think we mentioned before with the financial report, we have our activity reporting. So these are the activities in the long-term plan that we track, and these are self-assessed by staff and given a traffic light status of red, amber or green. And we also include our 10 strategic projects that have been identified by our executive leadership team, and they are actually tracked monthly, but we put them in this report quarterly as well. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sarah. Questions? Councillor Foley.
I've got a few, if that's okay. I'll try and get through. Social media, full-time social media advisor is at a new role, and it's sort of attributing a rise because of that, but it's coming off quite a low base and quite volatile anyway. So it's probably a bit early to tell long-term. Would that be?
Possibly, Mike. Sorry, I might have to defer to Mike. He has got a strategy behind our social media.
The questions around the strategy?
Around this, well, yeah, we've had this role in for how long?
Oh, so this role was a contract role taken on in November last year. It's to create on a digital team capacity to both monitor, respond in a timely fashion, and gather intelligence from social media. The contract role is relatively inexpensive and coming in way under budget, so it has recently been extended to the December. It gives us insight, a lot more insight and awareness of what's going on in social media. Social media is becoming a CX channel for us. We do respond to people's questions there. Did that answer your question?
That's fine. Thanks, Mike. Emma, next question, please, Chair. The transport level of service measures, it's saying patronage increase this quarter, but will not be enough to turn it into an upward trend. Is it so that's saying that this full year forecast is still going to be down, which was down the year before, which is down the year before. So I guess, yeah, I mean, how much do we keep going to spending more and seeing less? Because and the reason I raise it is because it's quite a contentious issue in the LTP with ratepayers that have suddenly seen quite significant figures on their rates calculator.
GM, answer that. Katrina?
Through you, Chair. I'll try and answer that. Essentially, over the last 9 years of the contract, we have seen a decreasing trend in public transport, absolutely in patronage, despite decreasing fares. our regional public transport plan review that we undertook 2 years ago identified the fact that our public transport network isn't delivering what our community wants, which is a bi-directional and frequent service. In actual fact, the service isn't getting people from where they need to where they are needing to go. In addition to that, district councils have over that time decreased the cost of parking in the CBD. And despite what we might think congestion's not that great, I'm apologising, I'm quite sick. So all in all, our service is not terrific, and what we're trying to do is improve that service. The cost of delivering said service has continued to increase. In the last 5 years, we've been subject to 30% indexation and continued increase in driver wages. So it is more expensive to deliver, it is less costly to drive, but there are parts of the community that absolutely rely on public transport and without it could not get to work and could not get to the hospital and could not get to the schools. And so our job as a regional council is to ensure that the service we're delivering is more effective and efficient. And I'm working really hard with Waka Kotahi right now to determine what the level of investment will be going forward, which we will find out in September.
Thank you, Katrina. One more? Yeah, if I could just do one more, please, Chair. Māori partnerships, how much do we, what's our annual budget on the Māori partnerships?
Good job over here,
Just
Chris.
round figure.
Trying to remember. I don't have it.
Just while you're looking there, I believe we significantly hiked that last LTP, but just, yeah, kind of no report for a quarter with quite a significant investment is just a little bit concerning.
I see Te Wairama coming up, so would you like to answer that one?
Kia ora, Councillor, and through you, Chair, my apologies for that. I believe that the reporting period happened between my transition from an acting role but definitely not an excuse, I can rectify that. The Māori Partnerships operational budget sits in the realm of 420,000, sorry, I'm just looking to...
The operational budget, and this was monthly, 47.
We've got Tangata Whenua partnerships as well.
Perhaps
I'll carry on talking, I'll find out in a minute.
We might be able to do a follow-up, given
Yeah,
Te Wairama's literally just started in her role. So perhaps good to get a written follow-up.
Through you, Chair, can I just jump in there a little bit to help out Te Wairama a little bit? In the last financial year as well, we did absolutely increase, not this financial year, previous year, increased the operational funding for Māori partnerships, and we transferred or carried forward some of that into this financial year in order to undertake the vision values work with our PSGEs, so that funding is sitting now in policy, but in the same time there was a significant amount of work that needed to be done on Mātauranga Māori that falls into this financial year, which Piri had initiated, but due to the cyclone had stalled, and that work Te Wairama has just begun with her team and engaged consultants on that. That adds some context.
Update will be great.
Happy to do that. Thank you, Katrina, for sticking with us and for that was a useful response as well. Further questions? Laura?
Just in addition to that, can we stretch out what's operations with the Māori partnerships and what's engagement as well with the Māori partnerships? Given what Katrina's just mentioned, a rollover, I think it was over 800,000 for engagement on the Kotahi plan. I think for us, we did ask at the last RPC meeting, not this one, the prior one, that we want to understand the total operational engagement and relationship building for the Māori partnerships. Full stop, just so that, again, using the term as a Chris, bang for buck. Where's the bang for buck happening for us as Māori partners? Kia ora.
I think the previous year there was underspending, wasn't it, in regards to the Māori budget? I remember commenting that we hadn't spent, it would have been impaired at this time, and obviously there was a lot of projects and money could be allocated in some of those other areas. Yeah, from memory, so.
Yeah, and just through you, Chair, that under's been contributed to the pull forward or the rollover of money into that Kotahi Mātauranga Māori funding. So, yeah, we can definitely get that back and I'll get information circulated.
Awesome.
Councillor McIntosh.
Thanks for, I see the customer satisfaction rating there this quarter, 85% good, 15% negative. Actually, it was quite a bit better than I was expecting. And I'm just, how do you compile that? Is it
So people who inquire is only done by email. So only people who write, who make an inquiry through an email, there's a bounce back after the issue is resolved, and ask them to give some feedback at the bottom of that email. So it is only for people who inquire via email, and it's a little poll at the bottom with some notes.
So I think it's there's a fair bit of money involved in this, but for me it's a much more realistic thing to find out what the population thinks of us. And has the council ever done that? Or is
There is room for commentary as well, so we offer feedback to members of staff through that format as well.
Through you, Chair, yes, we have in the past had wider satisfaction surveys. I believe we are about to restart them midway through this year. I think the challenge in the past is that they have kind of been apples with oranges and pears with persimmons. So we're trying to put them onto a place where the stats work and it's through the year and they're comparable year to year. And that is a randomised survey of people out in the community. So you shall get the results of the first one of those in the second half of this year.
First one should be in August, the results, the draft preliminary results before in September. The second one will be in March. We will then have 1,000 people across the whole year, and 500 every 6 months. That's the game.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Hey, did you consider making that an omnibus survey with the other councils? Because they're quite expensive. I agree with what you're doing, but they're quite expensive things to do too.
I would love to join with other councils. It may depend on them.
Whilst other councillors are figuring out whether they've got any further questions, I'll pose a couple. And there's a couple of questions on people and capability and then one on emergency management. So it's a topic of great currency amongst some parts of the community as the number of staff that we carry as the organisation, linked to the cost of rates and the growth that's been experienced. And so I'm trying to understand the information that's being presented here. We're 317, so the big picture number, top left-hand side of page 7, 317 employees. If we look at the graph, both staff and FTE numbers are in the high 300s. So my first question is how to interpret these numbers.
Yeah. So the first bit and the top number is only permanent members of staff. So that's 317, but the graph below includes all staff that are on fixed term, casual staff as well, and also our permanent staff.
And
so
summer students.
Summer students, which are kind of in the casual. Just because we've got that trend line, we've kept it, so trying to keep it separate because I think there was some inquiries about our number of staff, and that's why we updated that top figure, which is just focusing on our permanent members of staff. So you're right, they are different numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Look, and the second question's around the commentary on vacancies and recruitment and the process around exit surveys. So 35 staff resign in the quarter, we only have 13 surveys. So I'm kind of struggling first principles to understand how well we actually understand those that are exiting if we're only getting around about a 30% response rate in terms of exit surveys.
I don't have
Purely
an update on that
voluntary.
one. Yeah.
So, yeah, people can't be compelled to do it. So some people go, yep, we'd like to, and other people, no, we don't. Okay, so there's possibly an inherent weakness in our ability to really understand why people are going, why two-thirds of them are going.
Breaking arms is not part of the equation.
Right, okay, thank you for that. And just onto emergency management, page 24. Really just trying to understand the deficit, quite a strong deficit, what that represents, and whether that's a deficit that goes to all of this organisation or is spread throughout the contributors to regional emergency management. We're looking at a deficit of about 2.7 million against budget, and I presume that's sort of community resilience building. Well, I hope that the difference is in good spend into building our community resilience in the community hubs, but I'm just guessing.
So I think in terms of the expenditure level, the deficit has been driven by the expenditure level, which is $4 million above the budget. There was a lot of costs in that were carried over from the previous year and finalising a lot of the initial response staff, starting to get into the reviews, everything like that. The CDM area has captured a huge amount of costs of staff from across the organisation that was still badged as working on recovery or response activities through there. There does need to be a little bit of work to move some of those back to their own areas, but that's where the costs for the CDM stuff is coming through, sort of that flow on of the cyclone stuff, or the cyclone responses in there.
So that's our own costs as opposed to
it's more about our own costs. There's some of the costs in terms of the reviews and that we're still being badged against work streams that sit within the CDM area.
Can I just a further question? Know that the reserve is in deficit for regional emergency management. How does this, operating further deficits, are they going to add to that reserve, or is this just ring fenced for us, for our own P&L?
I think this year the reserve, because we are getting some more revenue coming through as well, once we have tidied up the expenditure to get them going back against some areas. So, for example, there is sometimes stuff in ICM where the staff have been redirected and doing work against emergency activities. ICM is quite underspent in there because they haven't backfilled those spaces. So when we get the full analysis of all of this, move the CDM staff or the costs out of CDM back to where they should belong in there, I think we're looking at our reserve actually being more in line, more or less where it was at the end of last year, that we've then put into the long-term plan to start repaying those bits out.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thanks, Chair. I guess it's more of a high-level question around the health and safety stats, and there's a higher level of incidents this month than we've seen for a while, although it sounds like at least one of them was a wasp sting. But I've asked, Chair, and maybe you can help me out, I've asked for health and safety to be a standing item on the Corporate and Strategic Committee agenda, where we can actually hear from our health and safety leads around areas of principal risk and management strategies and what's being done, what's being encountered, so that we can fulfil our obligations in terms of line of sight into all of that. Where has that got to, or is that tied up in RAC at the moment?
Yeah, I'm happy to report that you're correct that is tied up, for want of a better description, in RAC. So we're working through an audit and risk reporting from there, and so there is no report from audit and risk this quarter. I expect in future there will be. So yeah, so the assurance will start in audit and risk, and it'll cascade through either to this committee or to council itself.
Well, how do I get direct line of sight if it's getting filtered through RAC?
Well, you can join RAC, or you can ask questions at a council meeting.
Yeah, I don't think that's satisfactory, so I'll just table that.
With respect, I'd say the quality of the reporting and the work that you will review from RAC will govern your level of satisfaction, hopefully.
Yeah, well, I've never understood an RAC report yet, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Anyway, it's a different language. The second question is more just on levels of service. When do we start reporting on the next, the LTP, the levels of service that are in our LTP? Will that be in the next financial year? Because I noticed the integrated catchment management ones have all fallen off a cliff, effectively, but most of the ones that are orange or red won't be levels of service next year. So what's the transition there?
I could answer that, Chair. We have one more quarter of reporting, which is actually more likely to be our annual reports, our end of year, where we report for the last time on this set of levels of service measures. So the next, once we've approved the levels of service in our 3-year plan LTP, it will happen at the end of the first quarter of next financial year. So usually around October, I think we have a corporate and strategic committee.
Right.
So you're right, Councillor Williams, a lot of these will fall off as we've brought on some new ones and revised some old ones going forward.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Ormsby.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Sorry. On page 24, the Hawke's Bay Regional Recovery Funding, there is no status or commentary for that table. So what is the purpose of it being in this report if we cannot measure or have no forms of measurement? So I suppose that's a question, and whether or not there is a mechanism for there to be included in this. Otherwise, it's just a table with numbers.
It's a good question anyway. I will take that away. So the purpose of that is that actually does have some, it's not necessarily the Regional Recovery Agency activity that we've taken on, and I think the wording might lend itself to suggest that it is, but actually it's not. So we'll look to change that going forward.
Councillor Venby, you had a question? Yeah, I had a question, page 15, and it had to do with area of predator control in regards to possums, and we were supposed to have a contractor model in action, and that is not able to be implemented due to Cyclone Gabrielle. And I hear now that landowners have been informed. I just would like to know how that has happened. And whether that actually has been effective, whether we actually we hear that it is not as effective as it should be. Has that got anything to do with the communication with these landowners?
Ian,
Yep. Through you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
It's going to meet one.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Sorry, I'm out visiting catchment groups today, so I couldn't join you in person. Look, the short answer is all of the landowners who sit within our PCA program, the Possum Control Area program, we have contact details for them all. And so they've all been directly communicated with to say that the contractor model is not being stood up and they still have their existing obligations under the Regional Pest Management Plan. And we're also using traditional means of communication through social media, newspapers, etc., to reinforce that message. Where we're comfortable that at the moment with our elevated level of monitoring that we put in place several years ago and we are continuing with at the moment, that we can quickly and early find areas where problems or numbers are starting to increase and take action. So at this stage, we think that the program will work okay, and we will maintain the communications, and we believe it is effective.
That's a good question, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Okay. So, so those landowners at the moment are rated for that. So that's one point. Second thing is we no longer are subsidising some of the aids that landowners could use to do possible control. And now, so that subsidy is no longer available. And if it's not, then you can see the bind. They're still rating for it, and they now have to buy aids that are more expensive. Hopefully you can give us some explanation on that, and hopefully I'm wrong.
So we still offer subsidies on baits. So there is a subsidy scheme for baits that is automatically discounted at the point of sale. So that continues. And look, where we find that there are issues that are larger than the landowner community can manage on their own, we will assist them to get on top of problems. So we do have an area in the north of the region like that. So where we find that without us taking action, the problem will get worse, we will intervene and support them to get on top of the problem.
Thank you, Ian. Any further questions? There are none. Someone like to move that we accept the paper? Thompson, after that, and Jarrett. Thank you. Would you like to speak to the paper?
I've probably just got a question just around the regional one. What's that, page 29? Just on the regional water security program. I see just down the bottom of the note there is saying awaiting funding decisions. And I know that's only a small brief on what's going on. I'd just like to just get a little bit more context on where that's at the moment, if I may ask that question to you.
I think the key things in it, and Mr. Dolly will help us out. There's obviously an ongoing conversation around potential storage options, and the second one really is the MAR project, which I know Chris will be able to update us on.
Yeah, so MAR, we paused for a small period of time to learn what we could from the new government and their various announcements. So it was paused for 2 to 3 months. We haven't been able to ascertain any probably sensible intelligence out of any future direction for storage or government announcements. So we recently asked the MAR project to proceed, and it's a trial. It's got a fixed term. So we have asked the MAR to proceed through their construction.
Do we have any do we have an expected time frame on when we might be able?
We do. Off the top of my head, I think there's a 12 or 18 month sort of construction period, and then there's a 3 or 4 year trial period, and at which point we'll then need to make a decision about whether we retain the infrastructure and keep it, or whether we're happy with the trial, or all those sorts of things. So it's quite a fixed length of time.
Yeah. Thanks for that. I just noted a go or no go decision point needs to be made.
On MAR, yeah. So we're entering the trial, and then there's a future decision on that, and then obviously on the water storage, we've slowed the technical work down to build to really work on the relationships and potential structures that could take that forward if the need arose.
Could I ask a question just on page 29 as well? Just sorry, I just picked up on it, but just where in relation to those CIAs, in regards to where that's going to be done, I'm just wondering where that was. Yeah, and I'm only asking that question because 3 years ago we had a conversation with HBRC in regards to that work, and obviously the site plan's come through, so it'd just be good to be aware where that tranche of work has gone. You don't have to answer it now, but if you can come back to me.
So is that in relation to one of the comments?
Sorry, it was just in the IRG flood protection program.
Yeah. So the team are working through a raft of cultural impact assessments to support that work. So those conversations are happening within those communities.
just through you, Mr. Chair, if I can just sort of support the comments by Chris. Yes, Peter, there was a hui last week just to try and bring the conversation or the work around the cultural impact assessment of both the Motu and Omarunui flood protection program back on the table between those that are involved, with Te Kaha and the new is taken over from John.
New project manager.
Yeah.
Is that Harry?
Oh, Thomas?
Thomas, it'd be Thomas, yeah.
Thomas.
Yeah.
So,
So those particular ones are linked to the IRG upgrade and are currently on hold while design finishes. And so those conversations will recommence. Yes.
But happy to bring you up to speed of one.
You know, that'd be really good. It's only because we were involved in, I suppose, a Taifina would want oversight on in regards to that. So, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So we have a mover and a seconder. If no further speakers, we can vote to receive the paper. All those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you very much. So that comes to the close of the meeting, and apologies again for overrunning. We'll try to plan better next time. Peter, could I ask you to lead us in the karakia closing? But I think Indit, you might want to. Oh, okay, all right. Yeah. There's a big party going on.
I told you I'm a Mormon.
Oh, yeah, no, I can close it. That's right. I don't want to get in the middle of that argument.
Well, kia tātou katoa, te atuai o tō tātara ki a Ipurangi, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga taitanga ki te wairua tapu, ake, āmeni.